Okay. So welcome. Thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. So I honestly have thought about how to start this because I've watched a lot of your videos, see a lot of your posts, and I'm not exactly sure what to start with. I wrote down a lot of questions, a lot of points, a lot of things I'm really interested in. But basically, I guess just to get us going, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and why it is you do what you do?
This is always sort of kind of awkward for me. I'm just a revolutionary. I'm a divergent. I'm here to lend to shifting the trajectory of our current timeline that we're here on, which is sort of a nightmare of epic proportions. So I'm just working to try and shift that into something that's more of, I guess, positively aligned reality, or not completely inverted, anti-life, distorted, dystopic nightmare of a reality. So yeah, that's just the that's it in a nutshell, I guess.
Cool, man. Well, it's a very noble cause you have. Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking about this, like, you're most definitely the most controversial or divisive guest I've had so far. I have myself delved deep into basically every theory I could possibly get my hands on. I like to hear about everything and use my own discernment to figure out what is true rather than just listening to one source, obviously. And a lot of the things you say, I really do resonate with. But you've also given me new things to think about, things you've led me down new rabbit holes I never even considered before. So you just seem insanely knowledgeable about this whole thing. Like, you seem to be very just, educated on every single subject. The way you speak is very confident. You seem to always know exactly what you're talking about. And I just resonate with you very strongly in just the basic idea of, we're all one energy. We're all expressing ourselves through this infinite energy. And when we all recognize that, then we can take our own power back and we can truly create a world that is beneficial for everyone. And one thing I guess that kind of brings me to is you are currently in the works of creating your own community because you see the way we run the world as not sufficient, not efficient in any way. So you're starting something. What is it you called? And I remember you have another account for it.
Yeah, New Earth Network.
Right. And I sent you my email, and then a little bit later on, I realized that you said you only wanted people from the U.S. because you only wanted the people that were actually able to join. So you can knock me off your list, and we'll keep in contact for other reasons. Okay. But yeah, I'm curious, how's that going? I know that you said in a recent live that you're the only person that's actually committed fully, but you have a lot of interest in it. So I'm curious where you are in that stage and what kind of plans you have for it.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing to take under because, buying land and going off the grid, that's a sort of a complex thing as it is. And then trying to do it with a group of people, putting funds together from across the interwebs who you have not met yet makes it even more complex. So I kind of right now I'm still in obviously the very preliminary stages of it. I'm looking at for a while it's just been figuring out where's it going to be, looking up laws and zoning stuff and all of that type of not very exciting aspects of the starting the community, because initially I wanted to go to Costa Rica, but with the way that things are going, it's just not really a good idea to be buying land in another country that you're not a citizen of, and then you could be sort of stuck there, and then when your visa expires you get kicked out and you're not able to go back to your land. So it's kind of a that ship has sailed type of thing, which was kind of heartbreaking for me because that's really where I had my intention set on. But who knows what happens in the future. So for right now, basically I'm looking in the south because obviously it's a bit warmer, it's fertile. My two areas were basically going to either be the desert or the south. And just for like survival reasons and water reasons and, environmental factors like shade and stuff like that. Obviously water is a huge one. I just chose the south. So anyways, without going into a whole thing about that, we're basically waiting to start. I'm going to start doing the teleconferences with the people on Sunday because we need to start figuring out who's serious, who has money, who's done research, who's ready to commit. Because, once you put your money in, there's really no coming back out of it, because we have to put the money into a trust and then purchase the land through a trust. That way that no one gets screwed out of it. The only thing is you need to be prepared. If you're putting down 10K, and you need to be prepared that that's an investment that's it's there. So so trying to find the people who are serious. There's a couple of people who have wrote me who are serious, and they're wanting to talk more. So it's just an ongoing thing. So we're in the beginning stages. It's just trying to move it along as fast as possible, because we really are sort of out of time already, but we're going to keep going. We can't just be defeated and say, well, it's too late, and just stay in cities, because cities right now are a dystopic nightmare. I'm sure everyone everywhere in the world is experiencing basically the start of the New World Order, and it's not very pretty. So their goal is divide and conquer. So my whole ideology behind starting communities is it's the opposite of divide and conquer. It's uniting people and creating a structure that we can support one another, and we can be sort of the template of what a functioning, healthy social unit would look like, which we do not have really many examples of that in our modern world right now. Even in the hippie communes and stuff, I've stayed in some of these off-grid communities or these communes, and there's dysfunction within those. There's a lot of like a cult-like type of thing behind it. A lot of people haven't worked through some of their own distortions and wounds and traumas, and then it hyperinflates and just very big exaggerated type of issues in a community setting. So it's a very interesting thing. So it's still in the works though. So
I was wondering if, I know you said in one of your lives that you've actually you were surprised to find that there wasn't a whole lot of restrictions. And the reason why I'm curious about that is because I don't know if you know this, but I live in Canada, and the province that I live in has a major, what's the word I'm looking for? There's my God, why can't I figure out the word? But when they set up a system to get power from a giant waterfall, I can't blanking on the word for whatever reason. But anyways, we have one of those projects here, and that project, the corporation that set that up, they basically lobbied for laws to make it pretty much illegal to be off grid. Like, I literally cannot set up my house to have solar and wind in my own yard. It would be illegal. I have to be on the grid as part of the law here. So the place where you're planning on buying the land, you don't have any types of restrictions like that. And you said you can also pretty much build anything you want on the land that you own.
Yes, which was a huge relief to me, because the research I've been doing is like what you're saying. You're not allowed to build, basically what you want. You have to be hooked up to the grid somehow. Even if you're not hooked up to the grid, you're still paying the grid. I mean, if people don't see that we live in a corporate oligarchy controlled by banksters and mega corporations, I mean, I don't know. They just don't know enough, apparently. But so I was looking in basically the rural South here in the U.S., which like Alabama, Mississippi, these type of areas, and the land is super cheap. So the taxes are also very low. And then you can actually be completely off the grid. You can capture rainwater. You don't have to be hooked up to an electrical. And the only thing you do sort of have to abide by within the law is basically the health department sanitation stuff, which is basically removing your waste, because they don't want people just like crapping on all over the place and not disposing of it and stuff. So that's sort of like the only thing. They said, basically, I spoke to a realtor in the area who's from there, he's lived there, he's been selling, properties there for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And basically he said, as long as you have over an acre, you can build as many structures as you want. You can build whatever you want. So that's a huge relief, because in most places you cannot do that. You can't come near anything to doing that. I mean, they're out there checking to see if you're using 2x4s instead of a 4x4, it's like heavily controlled. So trying to find places where you can go off the grid is sort of like that's a whole research. That's what I've been researching basically for months.
Hmm. So do you think maybe it's because in the South they're very, they're much more dedicated to like retaining their own freedom, that they've fought to make sure that laws don't get in place that like forbid them from doing such things like that?
Yeah, that'd probably be a very small percentage. It's basically, it's so non-occupied. Like basically, where I'm looking at land, it's nothing but timberlands
Hmm.
and um, farmlands. If that, it's like if you look on a satellite, it's nothing but trees and then a couple farm properties. So it's just that they're not heavily, the corporations and stuff are not heavily invested in those areas because there's no one there. Now, if there were more people there, then this would probably not be the case. And they would have people hooked up to grid and all of this type of stuff and the zonings and all that. It's basically cities are pretty much human farms. So you have no rights in a city. You're an animal, you're a tax ID number, and you're just basically a slave generating revenue for the state. And they want to make sure that their cattle, are being milked. They're not going to let that go, unmolested. So the further you get away from the cities, you're more like a wild animal. You're more like a free range instead of a factory farm. So I think that's really why it is. Because the people that I lived in Georgia for 10 years, and the people are just as ignorant as anywhere else of the law. They're not trying to preserve their freedom. They're just concerned with getting drunk, eating fried chicken, and watching sporting events. So,
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. So, you say that there's not many other people that are trying to do this. Have you heard of any other communities trying to break off and do their own thing? Do you know of any communities doing this and having a lot of resistance from the state?
yeah. So there's plenty of people trying to do this. I'm not in connection with all of these type of people.
Right.
I would like to know more people doing it, so I can sort of look at what they're doing and sort of learn from that. There's always kickback from the state. There's always resistance. You got to go through all of these bylaws and legal statutes to just establish yourself, as a community or like a commune, for instance, which is like, it's different sets of laws for these things. So you have to create like community land trusts. You have to do all these, they make you jump through all these loops. And then they're still at your balls, basically, with a knife, like ready to come at you over any possible thing they can find. Because the bigger agenda we're dealing with, what people are calling the New World Order or whatever, is total enslavement and dominion over the human race, to the point where they're going to be basically merging us with machines. We're going to be living in a half, in the beginning, it'll be a halfway artificial reality, and then they'll be plugging us into completely, basically a Sims reality where you don't even know what is real versus what is the simulation. So without going, too deep, maybe we can go into that because that's actually important to talk about. But, so it's total control. So obviously people living off the grid, not being microchipped, not being in the waves of the 5G millimeter frequencies where they can't be affected by these things. That's not a part of their plan. That actually goes against their plan. So you're going to get resistance when you're going against these things. So yeah, that's always going to be a part of it. I don't know. I wish I knew more people who are actually accomplishing off grid, other than, like I said, some of these hippie cult type of things where the people are just high all the time and they're, they're not grounded in reality. And it's sort of just like a hippie commune versus like an actual off grid community are two separate things.
Right. They're like the people that, they've seen the light and they understand that that's where they want to be, but rather than slowly taking the steps to get there, they just want to jump there and forget all the negative.
Yeah. And they're delusional. I'm sure you've seen me post about spiritual bypassing and toxic positivity. They're basically the literal furthest embodiment of that, which is so detrimental because, they'll storm in there and wipe those people out in like 5 seconds.
Which reminds me of something else that you mentioned, that, like you said, that you are obviously going to have guns in your community for whatever reasons you may need. If that's to defend your own community, then you need to. And then you said also that drones are becoming a lot more prevalent. So you maybe be spied on or, surveilled through drones, and you want to have guns as well to take them down if you can. So in the state that you're planning on setting this up, I suppose that the gun laws are still wide open. And the reason why I ask is because there was recently a shooting here in Canada in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and that basically gave the impetus for our prime minister to ban all assault rifles. Actually, I don't think he banned all assault rifles, but he banned quite a few different models. And I've even heard people say that the models that he banned are pretty much exactly like other models that he didn't. They just have certain add-ons and stuff. So the law seems pretty much pointless. But as soon as I heard that, to me, that was just a way they just used that, whether that whole shooting was like part of some plan or not, they used it as a way to disarm a population that is basically going towards revolution. And I'm just curious, what is the state of gun laws in America now? I know that a lot of people are fighting to keep their guns. So I'm just curious as to like if you know much about the progress of where they are right now.
Yeah, this is also sort of one of their, biggest goals is to disarm people. I want to touch on this real quick. So spiritual people have this very negative connotation with guns. They're very uncomfortable with it. They think it's just, a total no-no, basically, in the new age and the spiritual and all this type of thing. So everything in the physical is a manifestation of spiritual. It's a manifestation of thought, of consciousness. Guns are in that category as well. There's nothing here on this earth that is not a direct manifestation of the will of consciousness.
Right.
So with guns, for instance, it's basically a boundary thing. So guns are to enforce a boundary. And what we're going to be dealing with, and we are dealing with right now, is major, massive boundary violations, which is basically going to take away the last of the rights we have. Once we're basically going to be injected with certain things and microchipped, and they have towers and all this stuff, there is no more freedom. They can turn on a switch and you wouldn't think you're happy. You'll think you're in the fifth dimension, and they just turned on a frequency to now completely control you, which is the very dark side of what we're heading into. And we're very close to getting there. So guns, for instance, they represent boundaries. So if someone's trying to infringe on your boundaries, on your free will, on your sovereignty, it's used to keep that boundary in place, obviously. So I just want to put that out there because people, it's not like I'm some gun-toting redneck and I just want to be shooting off and killing animals. Like, I'm vegan. I don't believe in unnecessary violence. And I understand the interconnectedness of all things. With that being said, we're also in a realm of duality where there are beings who are choosing to violate free will, who are choosing to, overstep their boundaries. So you have to deal with them. So that, it's important to remember that, because a lot of the new age propaganda and just our general pop culture now is pushing this positive vibes only love and light, and new age, 5D new earth is all love and we don't have to worry about anything. Everything's working itself out and we don't have to take any responsibility for anything. And that's all a ploy. I'm actually going to be doing some stuff about that. I've called this out before. You get a lot of resistance because the new age becomes its own type of religion of sorts. Mm-hmm. So anyways, without keep going further into that, basically in the US with the gun laws, and I'm not either party. I see beyond the political circus that we exist in, but and basically the way they've set it up, because the way democracy works is divide and conquer as a political tool, basically split people in half and have them fighting each other. It's basically the blue states are completely disarmed. For the most part, they're completely disarmed. Trying to get a gun, like for instance, in a place like California, is not going to happen. You're not going to get one anymore. Places like New York, you can't even have a gun. You face jail time for having a gun.
You can't legally own them anymore?
No, not in New York.
Really?
In New York City, you can't have a gun at all. It's like the UK, basically. The UK, you can't have guns at all. I don't know a ton about the laws in the UK, but I know in the UK, you can't possess a gun at all. Most of Europe, actually. Mm-hmm. So New York City. So outside of New York City, they may have, but probably very strict gun laws, obviously, because they, New York City is within New York. So a lot of the laws passed for the major cities in a state sort of ripple out into the rest of the state. So pretty much what you're dealing with is the West Coast and the East Coast, basically the Northeast, which is like, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey. Those places have the worst gun laws in the country, more or less. And then you got places like California, Seattle, Washington, Oregon. They have terrible gun laws also. And then you pretty much got like the Midwest and the South, where the gun laws are more intact, but they're always working to try and disarm people, like I said, because they want to violate your boundaries. And if you're capable of maintaining your boundaries, that doesn't really work for what they're trying to do.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, what you said about like how people just want to just get rid of them all completely because they feel like, you just got to go to the love and the light. Again, that's just kind of that attitude that they see the end point. Because to me, I do envision a world, I don't know how many years down the road, where guns wouldn't be necessary, because everybody's literally vibrating at a higher consciousness. Everybody understands that they are one and the same. So guns will not be necessary. But to just say, I want to go there now, so I'm going to give up my gun, is just not practical. And you're just putting yourself and your family in danger by doing so, because there are people that are in control that are trying to take advantage of you at this point. And it's important to remain in a higher state of consciousness, because if you're focusing on the negative all the time, and if you're letting that get you down and you're letting the fear take you over, that's exactly how they control you. So it's important to have that level of high consciousness, but that level of high consciousness also comes with the awareness of what's truly going on. Like, I experience love and light most of my days, but at no point am I not going to pay attention to the fact that there are powers that be that want me to go back into my fear mindset. So yeah, it's really important to stay at that higher vibration, but at the same time, be aware of what you are currently in.
Yeah. And something that people need to realize is ignorance is not a high vibration.
Absolutely.
The mark of a true light worker or a light warrior is being able to witness the darkness without falling into the darkness, into those lower states. So it's great if people can maintain, high vibrational love and light, but they're still aware that there's satanic child sex trafficking going on, and that they're basically trying to turn us into cyborgs, and they're, working vehemently to enslave us. And it's happening right now. We're in the middle of it. So it's like you use the higher spiritual awarenesses to ground you in a place where you're not in fear. Sort of like it's your sword in this reality. You don't have the fear of death. You don't have the fear of what can come of not standing in your truth and your light. And you allow that to, it's like your sword, your shield, your armor, your everything. And then you come into this realm of duality, and you can stand in your truth, and you can stand for love and all of these things, realizing that it's not this, foo-fooey, everything's love and light, and we just focus positive and everything is going to turn out happy. Because that's ignorance, and ignorance is not high vibrational. It's not a loving, it's not any of those things. It's a fear energy. Fear and ignorance are sort of one and the same. If you're looking in the realms of duality, if you're talking about like love and truth and all of these things as being the higher vibration, then you got fear and ignorance on the opposite side of the spectrum. So when people ignore things because they don't want to feel negative emotions, or they ignore things because they don't want to ruin their good vibes, that's ignorance. And that's actually, it's just like the MLK quote of, basically, I'm probably going to mess it up, but it's basically that those who don't protest evil are in support of it, basically. So it's pretty much consent through ignorance, which is what they've been doing for thousands of years. This is why they've, spiritually disarmed people, enslaved them into different, disempowering belief systems, taught them magic was evil, taught them that connecting to God themselves is evil, all of these type of things. So, I can go down a whole thing about that, because people don't realize the spiritual bypassing and the toxic positivity is serving the elite's agenda, because it's keeping people ignorant. It's keeping them irresponsible. And when you do that, you're feeding into it, basically. Because, for instance, say someone with this mindset of, I just focus positive, I don't focus on anything negative, and that's my reality. So say someone breaks in their house, and then they will rob them of their food. They'll, rape their wife or kidnap the children, at what point do people say it's not all positive love and light, and I have to take actual responsibility because I live in a realm of duality that's literally reaching a contrast that's making it so you can't avoid it anymore?
Exactly. And I think there's a big difference between like ignorance and choosing not to indulge in, let's say, like the fear porn. You know what I mean? Like, I'll just give an example. Like, I was on my Facebook today and my friend had posted a video and it was just like a compilation of police brutality. And I watched like 10 seconds of it and I was just like, I don't need to watch this. Like, it's not that I'm ignoring it. I'm fully aware of what's going on in the world when it comes to police brutality, because I've looked into it before. I've made myself become aware of that, but I don't need to watch it over and over and over again, because it does, bring me down a level. It makes me a little bit upset. It makes me go, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is going on? But I don't need that motivation anymore. The same way, like, I don't eat animal products as well. After I first watched, have you ever seen the Earthlings documentary?
Mm-hmm.
After I seen that, I was like, I don't need to watch any more of that. I understand. I've made the decision to not support it. And now I don't need to watch it, because watching it now just brings down my vibration. So there's a difference between avoiding those things to keep your vibration high. And there's a difference and between that and like avoiding it entirely so you just pretend it don't exist. The only way, like you said, is to remain in a higher state of consciousness, is to know that there is this duality. There is the terror and horrible stuff going on in the world, as well as the positive light and love. And I think to get to that, they might have that spiritual awakening, enlightenment moment, and understand that in the grand scheme of things, like, just to quote, like, I don't know if you ever listened to Ram Dass, but he's very much into what was his guru's name? Neem Karoli Baba. He always used to say, Ram Dass, don't you see how it's all perfect? And that mentality I get, when I'm in my highest state of consciousness, because it's all perfect in the sense that it's all part of the game. The negativity and the positivity is all part of the game of duality and creation in general. So yes, it is all perfect, but to take that and use it as like, it's all perfect, so I'm going to ignore the negative and just pretend it's not there, that's not productive.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't help us. In order to change, we got to become aware of it, speak up about it, and share this kind of truth. Like, as I was saying, like, I haven't really gone very deep into these subjects on my podcast yet. I've toyed around with the ideas. A friend of mine and I had a podcast where we spoke about just changing the world in general, like moving away from like capitalist type systems. And we like touched on the whole conspiracy era. And we never really went deep into what we believe in that area. But it is important for people to be aware of these subjects, regardless of whether or not you fully believe in them. It's important to hear every side, because again, I don't know for sure what's truly going on in the world. But when I listen to people like yourself, you have all this information, and it always coincides with the other people that say the same thing as me, in the sense that we're all an infinite energy expressing itself. So when people talk about that and share that truth, they're usually the ones that also say we're being controlled on a mass level to keep us dumb and pacified and ignorant so they could control us more. So it's not always that I've done all the research. I haven't looked at every scientific paper or government documents to find out what kind of underground operations are on the go. I haven't done all that research, but the people that do talk about that often say the same thing in the regards of like who we truly are. And when we recognize who we truly are, then we can take our power back. So that kind of brings me around to like, I would like to go a little bit deeper with that with you. And I guess just get, not necessarily a short summary, but for the people who are listening that are like, that haven't really heard these truly horrible concepts before, I'd like for you to maybe give like a summary of what's going on in the world and why we're here and why these people want to control us truthfully, because it goes a lot deeper than just money. When you really go down that rabbit hole, we're talking like blood sacrifices and like pedophilia and all that kind of stuff. And just recently, I'm sure you're fully aware and probably got some stuff to say about the recent arrest of, what's her name, Ghislaine, or whatever hell her name is. So yeah, if you could just like pretend as if I know nothing about the current state of the world and just give me a quick crash course on why the state of the world is as it is and who's truly controlling us.
Yeah, there's no way to do a crash course on that. We'll see how far we get without taking 8 hours.
Sure, whatever you got.
So to get a bigger overview of what's going on, you have to look back in history. A lot of people now, they're just sort of waking up. They're hearing about the pedophilia, the trafficking, the Satanism, the, what they're calling the cabal, the control network, and all of these things. This stuff is not new. It didn't pop up in the past 100 years. It's not a new phenomena. It's not that this just sprouted up and it's a conspiracy. This is history. This has been going on for thousands of years. So if we want to take it back, it goes into something that is basically beyond most people's comprehension. We're dealing with the multidimensional and also sort of entities, if you will, who basically, if you look back into the ancient texts, and they're calling them the fallen angels or the Nephilim or the gods or whatever, way people had of interpreting what these beings were, we're just going to take it back to post Great Flood, basically, which was the fall of consciousness of humanity, where we basically were plunged into a very carnal, very ignorant, very, sort of the dark ages of the human mind. So anyway, we'll just take it back to Sumeria. So with Sumeria, we're dealing with, I think, like 6,000 to 8,000 years old. The Sumerians, obviously, if you look into Sumeria, we were talking about taking people from what would be considered caveman mentality, and then all of a sudden overnight they have mathematics, they have agriculture, they have timekeeping, they have all of these things that sort of came out of nowhere. And if you look at their things, they basically say, well, these gods came to us and they gave us this knowledge, and pretty much re-jump-started human civilization from what they wanted them to be. Because human civilization existed way beyond this last cycle that we're dealing with, if people want to talk about the Atlantean time periods and all of these type of things. But that's like going way too far past what most people need to be comprehending. So anyways, you get Sumeria, and then you get after Sumeria, and there were things going on all over the planet. It's not that we just talk about Sumeria or Babylon or these things because they're sort of the apex of the human consciousness at that time. So from Sumeria, which also coexisted in the same time as Babylon, like I said, you had people coming from like Dark Age, caveman type of thing, and all of a sudden they're building cities. They have agriculture, they're doing now worshiping gods, and they have this whole pantheon of gods and all of this. So anyway, you take it from Sumeria to Babylon. Babylon, I would hope people have some awareness of Babylon and what was going on there. Basically like the most corrupt, sinful, debaucherous, disgusting place to exist. Not that we haven't had several of those. Rome, the entire U.S. at this point. So then you had Babylon. So basically you had the priesthood of Babylon, which became the real first super religious fanatics who basically wrote the Talmud. They were doing, in the Bible, they'll call them the Canaanites, which were doing human sacrifices, child sacrifices, animal sacrifices was like not even, something to bat an eyelash at that point. Really, it was more they wanted the human sacrifice, child sacrifice, and they erected the Temple of Solomon. So I don't know how much people know about Temple of Solomon, basically like the Antichrist temple on earth, pretty much, where they had a pantheon of gods that they would sacrifice children to. Do some research if you're watching this. Go research Temple of Solomon, research Babylon, research Sumeria. This requires you actually take time. You just have to expose yourself to the information, and then truth will resonate. This is the thing. It's not this left brain thing of this is the truth, this is not the truth. You have to just use the external world, unless you have the capacity to do things like, astral projection or out of body, other type of psychic extrasensory abilities. You don't need the external world in, resources like, books and videos and history and all these things. You can access it directly, which it comes a point where you will be able to access these things. But for most people, we're not at that point. Mm-hmm. So basically, there's no basically to this whole conversation. This is why it's sort of complicated.
Yeah.
Just talking about Babylon could be an entire, 3-day dissertation. So anyway, you get sort of a group that fled Babylon, which is now who are calling themselves the Jews, or the ones who have now retaken over Israel, calling themselves the Israelites when they're not. They're the Khazars who fled Babylon, went to the Caucasus Mountains, emerged out of the Caucasus Mountains into Europe, infiltrated Europe, became several different things throughout Europe. They invaded the Roman Empire through the Catholic Church as the Jesuits. They formed multitude of secret societies like the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Rome, the Knights Templar, the Bavarian Illuminati. I mean, so the thing is, certain groups basically they hold power for a certain amount of time. Basically, for instance, you say you have the Knights of Malta or whatever were formed in, I don't know when they were formed, the 1400s, and then they last to the 1800s. Then they switch faces. Now they're calling themselves the Freemasons, or they're calling themselves this or that. The knowledge is handed down to them. They know what's going on. So this group, they've known about ancient history. They know about galactic history. They know about spiritual stuff. They know about magic. They know about all of these things that have existed forever. It is this is all just universal knowledge, but they shepherded it. Basically, this is why people like Yeshua were killed for speaking out, against the basically standard consciousness of the time, which was Judaism, which was heavily sacrificial and very inverted and distorted. And so, when you go against that, you're going to get killed. Anyways, so these people in positions of power, they shift face, they change costumes. They're at one point they're the Roman Catholic Church, and then at another point they're the monarchies of Europe and the different royal families, and it's all the same thing. It's all really the same people. People who believe they're descendants of the gods, they're demigods. They have the right to rule over humans. If you look at some of these religions, they basically believe they're a superior race who they can do whatever they want to the rest of us. And it's exactly how our reality is playing out, where the vast majority of us are a slave race. And then you have the very tiny, what we call the 1%, the cabal, the global elite, whatever. These people are doing exactly what they believe in. And it sort of has gotten us to the point where they're not just those entities are still controlled, like the royal families and the Vatican and all of those type of things. But it's to the point where it's all interconnected. And it's this massive network of compartmentalized power brokers, if you will. So we got the mega corporation CEOs. We have the banksters who basically buy and sell everything, governments, currencies, all of it, healthcare systems. I mean, war, everything. And then they buy out the politicians. So the politicians, some of them may be a part of these elite royal families or bloodlines or whatever. What we're calling now Zionism. I mean, there's a whole slew of names that we can call, but the whole thing is it's all compartmentalized so that most people would see all these different groups and all these different factors, and they don't realize they're all a part of a central network that we're calling the global elite.
Right.
So a lot of these politicians, they're just puppets. A lot of this, we see it in the media, which the media is another form of government. Government obviously is a Latin word for mind control. The media is another form of government. It's another form of mind control. So those people, celebrities and all of them, there's a reason they get paid that much money. It's basically their penance for selling out their own people. They basically take people out of the slave class, turn them into celebrities, and then they use them to push their agenda, the 1%'s agenda. So they're just as valuable as politicians. That's why they have so much money. It's not because they're talented and they did a great, scene in The Notebook. It's because they're selling out the entire human race and brainwashing them. So I don't know how to simplify it. It's just such a huge, and this is why people just say everything's a conspiracy, because if you don't research history and you don't take this has been the past 10 years of my life. This is not me watching a YouTube video and now I just start spouting out these opinions on the internet. I was researching all of this stuff before social media even existed. before I knew anyone else even knew about this, all while also having my own spiritual awakening to things. And so it's just a lot. And now people, they're just waking up, like their eyes are just opening. And then you got people like me who are just like in their face trying to tell them all the stuff because they're in a burning house. Basically, the house is burning. You just woke up. There have been people banging at your door basically for the past 10 years and you didn't want to wake up. And now you're just opening your eyes and you think everything's just a love and light, or, we create our reality. We are one. This reality is an illusion. These type of things, which are true, they don't negate the reality we're experiencing. Things are real based off of consciousness. So to say this isn't real, or fear isn't real, or, your dream wasn't real, or that's negating, that's using this is what is basically spiritual bypassing, using higher spiritual truths to negate truths at the level you're at. It's just like slapping someone across the face and then telling them pain is an illusion. That didn't just happen. That's basically what people use spiritual truths to do.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's very true, man. Okay, wow. Yeah, that was great, man. Honestly, and I really appreciate you even trying to sum it up, because it is so much, dude. So I wrote down a couple questions as you were talking. You talked about how in history there's a lot of writings about how lower form hominids, or is that what the word I'm looking for is? They were interacted with by who they refer to as gods, who shared this knowledge with them. So then there's also the theory, and those gods, so to speak, would probably like extra dimensional beings, extraterrestrials, from different planets, from different dimensions, whatever you want to call it. It's basically all the same thing anyways. So I remember hearing and looking into the theory of them actually altering our DNA. Like they took primates that were lower form, and then they either mated with us or did some sort of DNA experiments that made us a little bit more conscious, but only conscious enough that we could do their work. And that reminds me of the Anunnaki. And I'm just curious, if that was the case, was it only a one-time thing that some extra dimensional beings altered? Okay. Shaking your head no for listeners. And also, was there different reasons for it? Like, were there some extra dimensional beings that altered our DNA so we could become a slave race? And was there some that just wanted us to evolve to a higher state of consciousness? And the ones that did it, what was their meaning? I remember hearing that some race altered with us to mine their gold because they used it for something on their planet or something like that. So could you tell me anything you know about those types of interferences?
Yeah. So it was not a one-time ordeal. It's not that we're just this or we're just that.
Right.
We're basically genetic mutts. We have the genetics of a multitude of different things. Now, whether you want to look at it as an extraterrestrial or an interdimensional, it's really one and the same. When you start understanding the vibrational nature of our universe, they are one and the same. So you can, appear and vanish, and you can, anyways. So we're basically a mutt of many different things, but not a mutt in the sense that we're low or we're not special. We're very special. And it's not so much like you're saying about, oh, they wanted gold and this and that. That may be an element to it, but the real thing is that our genetics, like if you look at certain races of these beings, specifically like draconians and stuff like that, what you're dealing with is they value genetics over everything. It's not like they want gold or they want money. They want genetics because they can use those genetics to create new races. And the whole thing is, a lot of these things, they interact on multiple levels. So like we talk about the human sacrifices and this type of stuff and the pedophilia. They basically, the energy that is accumulated in those experiences, the emotional energy, if you could see it from basically, if you could take yourself up a dimension and see how the humans interacting in these type of environments, the abuse, the molestation, the fear, it's as if a light bulb is lighting up. So they feed off of that energy. It's like a light that lights up, but it's an energy. Obviously, it's hard to explain some of these concepts with our linguistics because humans have not gotten to a very evolved enough place where obviously we could be doing telepathy and we don't even need to be having this conversation. But even to the place where our language is capable of describing some of these sort of concepts. So this is why metaphors are used to sort of try and explain things that we can't really tangibly explain, related, to multidimensional type of things.
Mm-hmm.
So that energy that radiates from that is like a source of energy for them to feed off of, because what we're dealing with is it, on the fundamental level, all it is duality playing out. If you want to say, okay, these fallen angel races, what we're calling fallen angel races, the draconian reptilians, Jehovah Anunnaki, all these people, they're basically playing their part. Like you said, everything is perfect. They're playing their part of being the darkness. So, when you're dealing with like Luciferianism and stuff like that, when they call them the fallen ones, they're trying to play God and all this. What they're basically saying is, we don't want to basically be a part of source consciousness anymore. We want to now split off and create our own. And this is what you see with the artificial reality, with the vampirism, the parasitism, all of these type of things. So pretty much they're a dying race because they've chosen that, and they survive through vampirism. But it's not just the drinking the blood. That's the physical representation of higher energetic vampirism, which is energy vampirism, quantum vampirism, which is thought consciousness, the waves that are created through thought. They harness all of that, but that's going into even more intangible levels of existence. So they feed off of the fear and all of this type of energy. So there's that. Where did we start again? Because I go down rabbit holes.
Yeah, no worries. Well, just the different ways that we've been interfered with.
Genetics.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, so back with the genetics. So pretty much they value genetics. So we're basically, in one respect, we're sort of genetic royalty, because it's like splicing. Imagine if you took like a pig, a chicken, a lizard, a bird, a dolphin, a kangaroo, an elephant, and a mosquito, and you sort of bound all these things together and threw them in a monkey suit. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much what we are. But it's not of those animals, obviously. Right. It's of different, we would call human light being type of things. We have many different things. So we have reptilian DNA, we have, all of these different DNAs within us, to keep it simple, because when you start stretching people's mind too much, it's just like, the information just starts flooding over their head like a waterfall, and it's not actually going through them to even hit resonance at all. So we're basically a bunch of different DNA with basically what was naturally occurring on the planet, which was basically like a monkey type of thing. So they spliced us with this monkey, and this happened over thousands upon hundreds of thousands of years. This is not something that they just took an earth monkey and did some weird genetic mutation and then we came out. That's not how it works. They just took a vast majority of the monkey's DNA because that's what was compatible with the earth. And, that was sort of like, how to put that? It was what was capable of functioning in this reality. And then they just slid in other portions of DNA, which would basically further other races. So, when we talk about star-seeded and all of this type of stuff, it's that we have all of these little types of DNA within us. So we're furthering the genetic lines of these basically beings that have existed for millions and millions of years. And we have their DNA now, which is why we even have beings, who are interacting with people through channels and stuff like that, because we have their DNA pretty much. So we're able to communicate through that. It's because DNA is a multidimensional thing. It's not just this physical substance that our current science model looks at it as. There's etheric DNA. I mean, that conversation can go a whole nother way. Anyways, so the mutations and all that stuff took place over hundreds of thousands of years. The thing with humans is we had our memory wiped pretty much. And then after basically Atlantis, which was, not that long ago, a couple 10,000 of years ago, we then arrived at basically what they call the fall from consciousness, which is where humans plunged into this dark age where they're running around like savages, eating animals, acting like they're an animal themselves. They have no knowledge of who they are, what they are, the universe. They've lost all sort of spiritual connection, some of them. And then you had some races who hid out from the Great Flood, like the indigenous people, who they retained some of the knowledge, and then you basically had people like the white race who were sort of spliced and engineered again, and then re-emerged out of the Caucasus Mountains. But we're not going to go into that. So basically, we're a multitude of things, and they did it for a multitude of reasons. There was benevolence behind our DNA being messed with. Basically them wanting to further their own thing. And then also by giving us their DNA, they give us access to the same reason that these elite bloodlines stay within their bloodlines is the same reason that the benevolent basically beings gave us part of their DNA, which is so that we can communicate with them basically interdimensionally or not in the physical. So they can, access us like, I don't know how to explain it. It's sort of like, those little cup phones where you give a little cup and then one person has the other little cup. Basically, when we have their DNA and the stronger that the DNA stays intact, which they've completely, for most people, it's so degraded. This is why they call 97 or 99% of our DNA is junk DNA. It's all scrambled. It's all degraded. So, this is why we don't have complete open communication, and that we even have to have these conversations explaining these things that would be common knowledge if the switch was on and our DNA was activated the way it's supposed to be, functioning how it's supposed to be. So it's sort of like they drop that little cup. It's like a little interdimensional cup, so we can try and communicate with them because they have the DNA to do so. But so the same reason that these demigods, this is what they believe they are, because they have a higher concentration of basically, whether it's Jehovian Anunnaki, Draconian, whatever type of things, they keep those things pure so they can keep a grips on them. So these people who we look at as, these sick monsters and these Satanists and these pedophiles and these, these elite people, if we're witnessing them and seeing the horror that they're creating, that's only a fraction of what they're experiencing by these other beings who are beyond any comprehension of psychopathic and evil that we can really fathom with words. So they're victims themselves. It's this whole thing of, victims become victimizers. But because they're part of this bloodline, and then once you start doing sacrifices and stuff and you're interacting with these demons and you're selling your soul, all these type of things, then you sort of get acquainted with that. And these people are beyond traumatized to the point where they have no connection to that light, that innocence, the purity, love, source, energy, God consciousness, all of these type of things. So they're basically as far gone as you can possibly be. So it's important to realize that when we're dealing with them. While obviously they need to be dealt with, they can't, this is what I'm trying to explain by not using these higher truths to negate things now. So knowing that these people are going through horrendous stuff doesn't give them the green light to now do it to other people, just like we wouldn't say someone being sexually abused doesn't give them the green light to now abuse other people.
Right.
This is where it comes to responsibility and stuff like that. So I know we've sort of gone on a thing, but it's just so much stuff to try and piece along with one subject that it's kind of hard to stay on topic with things.
Yeah. Well, man, all
let
that.
me know if you want, if there was anything that needs to go back to about the question.
Yeah, all of that is helpful, And one thing I remember hearing, what was it? Oh, yeah. Okay, so I remember you said in one of your lives, and I wrote it down because I wasn't exactly sure what you meant by it, but I remember you saying something along the lines of, we have DNA that can only perceive this dimension. And I was curious about that because I was just basically what I was wondering is that, I get that we are like basically vibrating at a frequency that we can only see this dimension. We're stuck in the material. We're stuck in the 3D essentially. But I just want to, I guess, clarify, although that's where we are, many of us where we are, do you think that everybody has the capacity to alter their own DNA in ways that which they could perceive higher dimensions? Or is it something? Okay, yeah. I was just wondering if it was something inherent about the DNA. Right.
So this is sort of where they took away the knowledge of what people used to call magic and these type of things, and they've hidden these concepts as esotericism and occult and all these type of things, because we definitely have the capacity. But I mean, it's a full-on spiritual war we're dealing with. Sorcery, dark magic, and sorcery to the 100th millionth degree. What we're dealing with right now, basically, with the vaccines and the chemtrails and the GMO food and the eating meat and all of these type of things, what it's doing is basically it's degrading our DNA even further. It's a full-on war. So these physical elements, they affect us obviously on a physical level, which affects us energetically and all of these type of things. So I don't know how to bring this back around, but it's just so much. So it's just, I don't know where to even start half the time with these subjects, because it's just trying to work with where people are at. And then I can already perceive the misinterpretations and all of this stuff. Exactly. So it's sort of just like, oh God.
I know. I face that a lot myself. Like every time I say something, automatically I'll think of a million different ways somebody can misinterpret it. So I try to just remain to what I know to be the truth, no matter what. But even, it becomes very difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'll try to rein you in a little bit with more specific questions. So, I remember you talking about this as well. How there are different kinds of like pedophilia in a sense, because there are people that are just seriously mentally ill because they were like greatly abused by, when they were children, and it just messed with their psychology. And then basically they end up repeating the same pattern because of it, because it's the only way they know how to connect to themselves or with other people. And you mentioned that, although what they're doing is horrible, at the same time, they can be helped. They can be, assisted and possibly cured if given the right education and love and light and everything that's necessary for them to evolve and understand themselves more deeply. But then you also said that the people, I guess, who are running the world, that are like the Luciferian people, they're more aware of what they're doing. They know that they're committing evil, whereas some people who are pedophilic, they'll be like, I hate my thoughts. I hate the fact that I look at children this way. They'll basically despise themselves for it. And those people, you were saying that, there is ways in which we could actually help them. But then you said beyond that, the people who are running the world, they do it because they enjoy it. They love it. They don't give a shit. But to me, I even see those people as lost children as well. Like those are the people that they're just so far into the dark that it seems as if the light is not possible to bring out in them. So I remember you saying something along the lines like we could just burn them at the stake. Like there's no coming back for them. But for me, I feel as if like everybody's redeemable. I feel as everybody is an expression of pure God consciousness. And as long as they understood that on a deep level, no matter how long it takes, even if you got to separate them from society so they can't do any harm, and then just spend time with them, educate them, and work with them psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, I feel like anybody could come back to the light if we were dedicated enough to help them. So do you see it that way on a fundamental level, or do you think it's just pointless to waste the time with them because they're too far gone and it would take way too much to bring them back?
I think it's beautiful where you're coming from, because that's a Christ consciousness perspective on it, and it's valid as well. And then you also look at the other perspective, which is like we're saying, they're as far gone can get. They know all of these higher truths about this stuff. And they choose to do it anyway because they're operating in this vampiric type of thing where they oppose the source. And they're very aware of this. They know this. They're not like just ringed in and they're like little. Which in essence, when they're children and they're born, they don't know. But it comes to a point where they're. It's just like, imagine you threw a fishing line from off of the earth and it just went flying off into space for like millions of galaxies away. And then you're now trying to say, well, we still have the line to them. So if we just ring it in, we can ring it in. It might take like trillions of years, but it can come back.
So basically you're saying, so we got other work to do. And if we get to the point that we're bored, if we get to the point that we've done all the other work, then maybe we could start work on them. But for now, we've got far greater things that we need to take care of.
Yeah, we need to take care of ourselves first.
Absolutely.
And we need to sort of reclaim our sovereignty. We need to really, the thing is like, we're in the middle of a war and most of us don't even know what's going on. And it's sort of like, we're just sitting around watching TV. Imagine taking someone and putting them on a battlefield where there's full on war going on. This is symbolic for the spiritual multidimensional drama, basically, is all it is on one level. You take someone and then they're just sitting there in the middle of the war, playing a video game, playing The Sims or something, or they're sitting around, watching football in the middle of a war zone. That's sort of what we're dealing with people and what's going on. So we need to get those people awake to figure out what's good. So you're jumping, which is good because it shows that you're aligned basically with Christ consciousness. You're aligned with source energy and all this. But we're taking the realization, which is that war is only solved from basically stepping above it into a place of sort of like integration and all this type of stuff. Already from the place where the people don't even know war's going on. And that we're already going to be rehabilitating the side that is, perpetuating evil. So it's I don't want to say the end goal, because there is no end or beginning to any of this. It's all just a cosmic drama, basically. But it's just sort of, as far as the time span of our lives are concerned, it's like, trying to piss to fill an entire ocean. It's just going to take forever. It's sort of ridiculous. And so these people are just as far gone can get. It's almost more merciful to just, get rid of them. I know that sounds bad, but, it's just how far, like, that's why I use the analogy of throwing a fishing line all the way out into galaxy. Like, they're so far gone that people who are of good intent, but are not at a certain level of awareness, they can't even fathom. It's like as gone as you can possibly get. Or it's almost just like if you picture white as the source and then black as like the edge of creation or source. These people are like at 99.9999999%, black. And they're basically as nearly as far gone off the edge of creation as you can possibly get. So trying to bring them back in when we don't even have our own houses in order, we're not really utilizing our energy well if we do that.
Right. Yeah. I completely 100% understand that. Yeah. Because like we said, it's just, we got other things that are right in front of us that we need to deal with first. If we get to a point where we're living peace on earth and there's still these people that are like that, they no longer have their power, but they still want to do these evil things, then maybe we can help them then. But in the meantime, we got bigger things to address. And what was it I was going to say? Yeah, it seems like shit, totally lost it. But this is what I always find when I'm speaking from my source. I can just kind of like get completely sidetracked, and then I can't go back because it's not rote. It's not something I memorized. Something I'm taking from within, right? Oh yeah, one thing I remember you saying, like, they know fully the spiritual truths, but they're choosing to go against it. But I would argue that just a little bit further and say that if they knew fully, like not only knew it intellectually, but experienced that they were connected to the ultimate source, then they wouldn't have the desire to separate and do evil things. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing, is that like when I'm fully connected to my source, I let go of Mike completely. Evil is not a possibility within me because it just doesn't make sense. It's illogical. So they may know like how magic works. They may know that we create our own reality. They may know that we have the power of God's within us, but they still see God as like this distorted thing that controls and has the right to do whatever they want. But if they fully seen God, if they fully understood that they were God in incarnation, then they wouldn't have these desires that is born out of fear or separateness. Because if you took these people of the world that are doing these Luciferian things, then they still have fear. You know what I mean? Like if you got control of them somehow and tortured them, they would probably beg for their life because they still fear hell or death or the wrath of the devil or whatever, because they still don't fully understand on an experiential level who they truly are. Would you agree with that?
Not completely. So let's see how to frame this. So when you're dealing basically with Luciferian consciousness, which is basically the opposite, basically, if we're going to use these concepts, Christ consciousness. And when I talk about Christ consciousness, I know most people's interpretation is probably relating to Christianity or
Right.
Jesus and stuff like that. He was a conduit of Christ consciousness, but that is not what Christ consciousness was. And,
Right.
and specifically when I'm talking about Christ, I'm talking about K-R-Y-S-T, which is basically the original sounds of creation, the original intent of creation, which was Karayasata, which is why they shorten it into Christ, which is where the entire distortion of the word Christ came from in religious context. But you're dealing with Luciferian consciousness, which is they understand the Christ consciousness, they understand that view, and they choose to go against it. So it's not like there's an ignorance or this or that. It's sort of like, imagine you're in a position where, I don't know, let's think of something stupid, in school or something, and you can choose to be kind and go hug someone, or you can choose to make fun of them and do something mean. And we've all sort of have taken place in that to some degree. This is why I'm using the analogy. It's sort of like the Luciferians, obviously to a very extreme degree, are choosing to say the little mean thing instead choose the kind thing, which they know the kind thing will feel good. They know it will bring love and stuff like this, but they're still choosing to do the hateful thing because it gives them that little weird feeling. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Where it's like you said something mean and it hurt someone and you get some type of weird, strange reward out of it.
Yeah. Makes you feel powerful.
That's what they're doing to like the nth degree.
So it's like they prefer their separation. It's not that they.
Yes. Well, they prefer it. It's just like, I mean, it's just dark and light. It's really, it's so simple. We really try and overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
They're choosing the darkness. And so basically, universally, which is why we're even existing, this is existing, and we're even having a conversation of this, is that universally there is still not a way found to reintegrate the fragments of source consciousness, God consciousness, to a place of wholeness, which is why the universe even exists for thousands, all these trillions of existence. We try and conceptualize it linearly, but there has not been found a solution on reintegrating those dark aspects, basically. And we're just sitting here living out our short little human experiences, trying to lend to the game itself.
Right.
So, but the issue is we don't know how to bring those people back in when they're in rejection of love. So it's sort of like trying to figure out how to love the devil, basically, is what we're dealing with. And it's still not determined because here we are talking.
Right.
We're
and that
part
makes
of
sense.
The infinite oneness, and the infinite oneness does not know how to deal with the situation. So every one of us, as this is going, as we exist, as consciousness keeps morphing and transforming into all these different experiences, we're lending to the solution. It's not set. This is a thing people, when they have this idea that God is some greater thing and it's outside of them and all this, they think that the future's set or there's ways to, these problems have already been solved. And a lot of our human problems, yes, from this perspective, they can be solved from a higher perspective. But the fundamental thing, which is the separation of, dark and light, is not really.
Well, that's inherent in nature, right? Yeah, and that makes sense because now that I'm thinking about it, I totally get where you're coming from, because it kind of reminds me of like the idea of soul contracts. So, like those people that are too far gone, those are the ones that said, when they were in the all, when they were part of the infinite absolute, they said, I'll go on earth and play the role of the devil, essentially. Yes. And there's no getting me back, but I'm going to play that role so you can understand what evil looks like, and then you can learn and come back to God. So yeah, that makes sense. Like we can do whatever we can to try to bring him back, but we know that the very trying is like a noble act, but inherently that we got to know that we're both just playing roles anyways. Me and you came here and chose to play the role of light worker. They, even though they're us, came here and said, I'm going to play the role of the devil or the dark worker or whatever you want to call it, so that we can both come back to union at some point in the future and be like, oh, that was fun. Now we all know we're God again. And then we'll play the drama all over again, because that's all reality really is coming until back and forth into the all.
Yes. Until we decide, which is what's happening, that we want a new form of experience of consciousness, which is out of the duality drama of our current universe and experiencing something different. But there's nothing lower about this experience. All consciousnesses, all life is, all existences and creation is just realms to play in.
Right.
It's just like consciousness is just like an infinite ocean that we get to play in different experiences. And this particular universe with the polarity is an experience that is desired basically through the mind of God, if you will, if we're trying to use these type of metaphors for explaining things. There, there are multiverses. There are numerous, at least 17, if in a way to quantify it, universes where there are completely different laws, completely different things that make those experiences, and we sort of go between them. And then as consciousness experiences all there is to experience, it creates greater expansion. And now it comes up with a new thought of a universe. And then a new universe will be the thought that sparks, it's basically a new thought in the mind of God that hasn't been thought yet. Obviously, we're trying to use linear human ways of explaining things that are really beyond this comprehension. But so as we experience in all forms of creation and consciousness, these different realms, these different experiences, we're lending to the expansion and creation of something new.
Right.
So basically, it's the same like with coming to Earth. People are always like, this is my last life. This is my last life, which I hope that I've learned enough from this experience that I, desire something new, that this wouldn't even be appealing to come back to. But not that from a higher perspective that matters, because there's no time. So one life is like the blink of an eye, and this is why we come back over and over. There's not this context of you're trapped and it's a soul trap and you're reincarnated. It's always a choice. You can go to hell if you want. It's a choice. You any of these things, you can come back to Earth. It's a choice. It's just what happens. Our desires here versus our desires when we basically reemerge into the non-physical. Our greater perspective is that, I want to go back because now I can do. It's almost like, think of like if you had a thought after you had a conversation with someone, and you're like, I wish I would have said that.
Right.
But on a higher level, you're able to go back, and then you can go back and do it, lend to some new thing, and it's constantly reaccumulating new desires and stuff like that. So this is why we choose to reincarnate or to stay in one particular reality over another, or universe, or any of these type of things. And at the end of the day, it's all just a giant cosmic game. But this is not to say that we just sit back and everything's okay, because it's just like if you're playing some violent video game or something, you're not just going to let your character die. That'd be like, you're a wimp, you're giving up. But that's what a lot of people are doing in the physical reality now. They become aware of these higher spiritual truths, and they're just like, I don't want to play no more. And they're sort of giving up.
Right. Yeah. I see exactly what you mean. And I think there's also a difference, and I think you would probably agree with this as well, is like there's a difference between those that are giving up and have that defeatist attitude versus those that are just like so aware of the highest spiritual truth that they'll become like a monk, go live in the Himalayan mountains and just meditate all day. And I feel like those people are equally as necessary, even though they're not on the battlefield like you and I trying to spread the truth. They are shining the light from higher above, so we can be like, if you look up there, you can see where we can be. But that's why we need the guy in the mountains as well as we need you and I on the battlefield playing those roles. But then there's other people that be like, I just want to be like the guy in the mountains, but they don't understand really truly how that is. The guy in the mountains is not neglecting the evil or neglecting the bad. He's just so high above all of it that he's just shining the expansive light that goes beyond it all.
And I would say even to that the guy in the mountain is sort of bypassing. So I understand what you're saying, that he's anchoring that certain energy and he's in a certain space. The goal is we need to integrate the warrior with the one who's high on the mountain, because it's still playing from this separation, because it's easier to be the one on the mountain than it is to be to actually have to integrate those things, because that's how we'll get the real change.
Right.
Because it's sort of when you withdraw and you're hiding away in a mountain, this has been going on for thousands of years, and they haven't solved the world's problem by hiding on a mountain. That's part of almost, I would say, everyone's spiritual journey, where you just say, I just want to be the one on the mountain and I don't want to participate in this drama. But that's coming in a resistance to life. Because life is messy. Life has a lot of undesirable things. Life has violence. Life has all of these things that we don't attribute with being spiritual or enlightened things, but they are a part of enlightenment. They're a part of all of it. So we need to find ways to bring that man on the mountain into, and I'm not to say that those people will not exist, because the people on the mountain, they serve their own thing, but it needs to get to the point where awareness is like becoming aware. It's not selectively identifying with, well, this is positive, this is the highest truth, and I'm only going to now focus on that. If you can maintain that highest awareness while also looking at the darkest of truth, which is there's like children being abused inside of basements and being ripped apart and having their blood drinking, while also maintaining the highest perspective of oneness and being above all of it and the cosmic game of it, that's where the true power is, from my perspective.
Yeah.
Because you're embodying all the awareness, not selective identification, which is, to me, is ignorance. Because if you're only selectively identified with that and not with that, you're less aware, which to me would be less light, less enlightened than a person who can embody both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes sense, because there's two like different ways to do that. You could be the guy who wants to get away from it all, so you go live in the mountains, but then you could be the guy that recognize your past life and you spent thousands of life as the warrior, and now you're ready to take a break from it and just go be the light in the mountains kind of thing. But at no point are you neglecting or saying that there isn't evil in the world. You are just being that shining light, so then people have this beacon to aspire to. But he's not going to tell you, come join me in the mountains. He's going to sit there as a representative of what the light can be if you do the work as well. Because when you have the highest awareness, you can know that everything is the light in general, and darkness is just kind of like the gap between two lights, but there's still some light in between if you look deeply enough, kind of thing. So yeah, there are the people that want to identify. That's the word I would really focus on there, is that somebody wants to identify as the light. They'll go in the mountains and avoid it all, but that's their identity. That's their ego. That's them wanting to be the light. But when you have a high enough awareness, you just realize you are the light, and then you just not remove yourself from the situation. You're in it, but you play a different role as the beacon of the light.
Yeah.
Cool. So I want to get, we could go into these spiritual concepts for hours and hours. I want to get into more specifics into what's going on in our current situation. I've delved deep into a lot of different opinions and theories as to where we are and what's going on. Clearly, I think we can both agree that there's some sort of plan or agenda with the way the lockdown is. And the riots and everything like that. Somebody's benefiting from it and using it to their advantage. In terms of the virus, I've heard different theories as to it's man-made, it's not man-made. It exists, it doesn't exist. It's not as bad as we think. It's way worse than we think. And from what I guess from my point of view, again, I'm not sure about any of this, but it seems that there's something that exists. I would lean towards the idea that it was man-made, or at least it was a virus that was altered in some way by men, and then released to the public on purpose. But it's not having the effect they wanted it to. So it seems like people are basically revolting and understanding that it's not exactly how they're describing it. There's the whole, I remember learning about the PCR test and how the PCR test doesn't exactly test for the virus itself. It tests for exosomes or some sort of genetic material that could give false positives all over the place. So I'm curious, do you think there is an actual virus, or is what we're seeing just an inflation of other illnesses? Do you think that if there is a virus, it was man-made? I guess, just get your thoughts on that in general.
Yeah, so I'm sort of coming to the point of even questioning germ theory and viruses and contagion altogether. But I'm not a scientist in that respect, and to know whether or not there's. I'm definitely leaning more toward the fact that these are exosomes basically excreting out of our cells, because there's so much toxicity within our environment, in people's bodies. They're intaking poison all the time. So there's constantly new, if we're going to sit there mapping exosomes constantly every year, this is why they say there's a new strand of virus. There's a new strain of this. So there's that. But then even if you want to play the advocate of, okay, the viruses exist and they're spread between people with coughing and sneezing and all this type of stuff. It it would, to me, I would be leaning toward the fact that it was man-made. And then even beyond all of these theories, we got to look at what the virus is being used for. That even the notion there is a virus, what this whole COVID-19 thing is being used for, which was the crisis to basically jumpstart the New World Order.
Right.
I've been waiting for this for like a decade. So I'm not surprised at what's going on. It's not pleasant. I'm not enjoying it, but I also know that this has to occur because it's pushing the contrast basically to the highest level, where it's getting, now white is very white and dark is very dark. And it's going to, this is why more people are waking up during this than any other time in our history for the past thousands of years. So that's sort of the silver lining. But it's also at the point where we're at the tipping point, where if we don't get people to wake up and choose, and this will happen in a multitude of domino effects of basically revolution, which is returning to evolution. It's not this, we just burn things down and we get mad type of concept that people have of revolution. It's, we need to turn around because our evolution is really sucking us into an AI, artificial reality, and trying to trap people into lower, time matrices, basically, where these entities can then suck off of their energy through AI and all this crap. You want to talk about the devil, it's basically AI. Anyways, so it's really looking at the bigger picture of what the virus is being used for. It's whether or not there is a virus or not. It's completely stripped our entire planet of any sense of normalcy, of freedom. And now people are terrified of one another, which is like the final straw, basically, of divide and conquer, to where now people are terrified of one another. They'll turn on you if you're not wearing a mask, these type of things. And so it was basically like David Rockefeller said, all we need is the right crisis and they'll accept the New World Order. This is the right crisis that got them to accept the New World Order, because now people are literally begging for control. They're begging to be controlled. They're, and then they're, as always, pinning us against each other over race riots. And now it's the mass versus the non-mass. It'll be the vaccine versus the anti-vaccines, all of these type of things. And meanwhile, they keep trudging forward with their agenda, which, if you look into the New World Order, this is not a new concept. The New World Order has been planned for centuries. And really beyond that, it's something that is reoccurring because people are not learning from it on a more spiritual level, to where this stuff reoccurs, and you can get into timelines and other planets and all this stuff. But the fact of the matter is we're not learning in a lesson, and then we're re-experiencing a lesson in a new way. That's all we're dealing with this same thing. So this entire thing that we've experienced has already been experienced. The whole getting sucked into a dystopic nightmare, and all of these things are reoccurring. So all we're doing is like replaying a video game that looks like a new video game, but it's the same exact thing with different characters and different things. And it's all about the energy. That the energy is that we're not learning how to integrate things, basically. We're not learning certain lessons like self-responsibility. It's just like, it's very nuanced, and it's just like this giant scale of consciousness and evolution, to where I don't know if this is going to be going too much off the charts, but the whole COVID thing is just leading us. This is now the New World Order. So people talk about World War III. World War III started 19 years ago. And this is now the New World Order. So we decide now, with the awareness of what's going on, what they're doing, when you figure out their agendas, what are we going to do about it? Now, a lot of people will just fall into their belief system and say, well, Jesus is going to save us, or Allah is going to save us, or we don't have to do anything, or we're going to be in the fifth dimension. It's all these different forms of externalizing power and responsibility. And then it leads you into this place where you will go into great suffering, which will basically be this dystopic, enslaved hive mind reality, because people don't learn. So it's sort of like, at the highest level, it's a cosmic game that we're not learning, we're not passing the level, so that the universally, it just formulates a new thing for us to keep being met with the same thing. So hopefully we learn, and we can not tip onto the side of basically AI, artificial de-evolution into basically using our quantum on the highest level to now just funnel into an electronic simulated false reality, where then we're being fed off, and then slowly that will all dissipate and it all returns to source. But we're here now, so we should decide what we want to do, because the new earth is not just going to happen. This is sort of what a lot of people like to say in the new age crowd. We're just going to ascend in the, what is that thing called? The flash or whatever. The flash is going to happen and we ascend and we take no responsibility. We didn't learn anything except that our power's outside of us and we don't have to do anything, and things are just going to work out. Mm-hmm. Which, if you look back at history, is not really how it happens. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of where I'm at with the whole virus situation.
Right. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, because I still don't know whether or not it's something that is dangerous, really, because even the cases I have heard about, in the beginning, my initial reaction was pretty much like yours. I was like, saw this coming. I didn't necessarily know if it was going to be a virus, but I'm always suspecting that there's going to be some sort of attack on our consciousness in some major way. And so when that happened, I was like, yeah, I'm not scared of anything anymore. So I don't care if I die, because I know it's not my last go. But anyways, my mentality was pretty much, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, which is spreading truth and love in whatever way I can. But I feel a lot more compelled these days to really speak up. I feel like it's a lot more necessary these days. But anyways, after this happened, I spoke to a couple of my friends, and one friend of mine is connected to some, I think his girlfriend has a mother who is a doctor in Toronto, and she was saying that what they were seeing in the hospitals was something they've never experienced before. And there's just people like, at first, you heard the whole rhetoric that it was only affecting sick people and old people. But then he told me that there's plenty of cases where there's young, healthy people coming in that can't breathe and stuff like that. So I immediately thought, like, what's going on? Like, this must be something. And yeah, I'm not saying it's not something they didn't plan, but it seems like it's a lot more serious than I anticipated. But now I'm starting to understand, or at least I think I understand, that there's a number of different things that are causing this, not necessarily just the virus, if there is a virus. A lot of doctors have described it to be similar to that of altitude sickness. And then I've heard that is connected to the 5G waves, because it alters the way our lungs absorb oxygen. So the waves themselves either affect our lungs themselves, or it affects the oxygen in a way that we cannot absorb the oxygen. So then we come into the hospital not being able to breathe, and we're hooked up to ventilators, and apparently even ventilators can be more damaging than helpful. So it just made me think, like, I don't even know if this is something that not that I need to fear. I wouldn't fear it regardless. But, I guess the only fear I have, or the only concern I have, is, like I said, I don't care if I get it, if there's something to get, but I don't want to spread it to the people in my life who don't have the level of consciousness that they cannot heal themselves, or, they might have the fear that they would fall into that hole and then end up being harmed by it. So it was just, that was my dilemma, I suppose. I was like, I'm going to avoid going out. I'm going to do the whole stay in my house thing, because for one, I have a roommate who has asthma, and they say that people who are asthmatic are a lot more susceptible to it. So I don't care if I get harmed, but I don't want to be responsible for the harm of others. And I don't even know if this is moving to a question or anything. I just want to put out there what my thoughts were on it, and I guess see if you have any similar thoughts or ideas in that regard.
Yeah, and that's sort of the trap they're trying to get people into, because now it's like associating with obeying orders with being virtuous because you care about other people.
Right.
So, and then we can get into the 5G and all of that stuff, because this is a major component to stuff. People like to just write it off as conspiracy. Throughout all of history, anytime we've increased, I'm sure you've seen at least people mentioning this, when you increase the electromagnetic radiation that humans and animals and plants are exposed to, you see massive die-offs, you see viruses, you see pandemics, and you see animal life dying. So they just turned on the 5G at the start of this last year, in I believe November or whenever this started. The 5G towers started getting turned on like en masse, not just like the one random 5G tower, and then not just the boost to the 4G. They turned on the millimeter wave frequency, which is like being in a microwave. So if you could understand, we're having issues with our with trying to have the oxygen bind to the hemoglobin in our blood. Imagine putting a human in a big microwave and then turning it on and then say, just breathe like normal, everything's okay. There's going to be health complications to that. So, and it's all people, young, healthy, old, sick, fat, everything. Obviously, people who are in poorer health are going to be more affected. But then, I mean, it comes to the point where we don't really know what's going on with our bodies. We're all contaminated with nanoparticles. I mean, this is basically known that, we've had military people come out explaining the technology. It's basically microscopic electrodes that are being sprayed through the skies that are in the food and all of these type of things. So we don't know how that's affecting us. We don't know how that the 5G being turned on affects those electrodes. I mean, it comes to the point they could be using literal stuff to make this happen. So it's just, I mean, it's very nuanced. Like I said, people, they like this. They like for people to be very black and white thinking, because it creates that war energy where I'm right, you're wrong type of thing. But there's so much going on that can affect our health. I mean, they have technology that is beyond people's imaginations, to where they can target individuals, and they can do this through your cell phone. I mean, if they want to, they have other means of doing it. But as far as, I think 5G is something that's important to talk about, because we're going to see health decline further. And if you notice, since the start of this lockdown, 5G rollout has been expedited. So, everything was shut down, and now they're installing 5G in all the government buildings. So hospitals, schools, police stations, fire departments, libraries, all these type of state-owned things, parks. They're throwing up 5G towers everywhere, because if you understand how 5G works, it's a very small millimeter wave frequency. So they need it all close. So if you could see it on, I'm trying to paint a visual here. Take our whole society and the cities and all of that. Now take a 5G tower and pretend that it's the radiation emitting from it is like a blue light. So the goal is everything has to be cast in that blue light in order to synchronize everything through it, because they can use beaming technology, which basically means, for instance, you can pass, say there's a transmitter at point A, and then, I'm sorry, my hand's like way out. I'm trying to do, a thing here. Say you got point A over here, and then you got a bunch of towers emitting stuff here that cast this blue light, if we're using that as the metaphor for the thing. And then you want to get something to here, which could be some person or something. From this point, because of that light cast on everything, it's interconnected through these millimeter waves. They can literally use beams. So, and that's the whole goal with the 5G technology, is to beam things, because you can beam information. It's much more accurate than, for instance, radio frequencies, where it's carried out on a thing and then you have to pick it up a certain way.
Right.
Beaming it's like a direct information transfer, instead of using cable wires and fiber optics and stuff like that. It's a direct beam, so that it's much faster, everything. And then it gives rise to things like lasers and, targeting people. It's just a complete nightmare. So they're basically rolling this out everywhere, and it's going to affect your health. Like you say, in the upper end of the spectrum, it affects the oxygen's capability to bind to the hemoglobin, which is like altitude sickness. It's like you're breathing, but the oxygen is not able to get into the blood, which then you're suffocating on a cellular level, basically, is what's happening. And so, there's that. We're calling it a respiratory problem that would contribute to appeared respiratory issues, and many doctors and people have come out against this. So there's just so many nuances to the whole health crisis that we're seeing. which is also, most of the people who have died are all obese or have, are over the age of 82 or have other health issues, which age basically and health issues in our world at this point are synonymous, because the older you get, the more crap you've accumulated, the more you fall off and, caring about yourself. And so it's just a mess. Our health is a mess. And then we also, are throwing now this extremely dangerous, untested technology into the public. It's basically a weaponized technology that's being deployed everywhere. Right. And, we're surprised at all we're going to see health. And if you looked at, psychopath Bill Gates in his recent statement with his wife, and they're talking about, pandemic 2 is going to get their attention. Mm. Because we're going to see this second wave is going to be blow this first wave out of the water. We're going to actually see deaths. We're going to actually see people all fucked up. And then that's going to give them the green light, basically, to go ahead with forced vaccinations, which is also going to tie in with, it's not even that the microchip is the biggest thing. They do want to do the microchip simply because it's easier and people, it has its own benefits. But they'll be injecting stuff that can interact with our the nanotechnology that's already within us, that will start formulating basically an artificial strand of DNA. They're trying to create the third strand of DNA, which is basically technologically manipulatable, which will be, once all the technology is in place, will act as a hive mind to where we're basically controlled. We don't know what's our thoughts versus the hive mind. Mm-hmm. We don't know what is reality versus what is the part of the simulation. So it's really sort of terrifying. And it shouldn't terrify you into a place of cowardice and fear. It should terrify you to action, to be like, we need to stop this. Because it's just like the show Black Mirror, which is ironic, because if you know what a black mirror is in witchcraft, it's used for scrying. You basically write into the future what you want to exist. And a lot of the times it's curses and, whatever. So even, and we know Hollywood is used as basically a giant spell casting, brainwashing thing. And Netflix is, sort of the apex of that at this point in history. So the whole show Black Mirror is casting onto the future what they want to create. And if you've seen any of the shows, I've saw several episodes. I don't watch TV, but I did hear about it. And I watched several of the episodes. That's the reality they're trying to paint. And it's a total technopocalypse, dystopic nightmare that will ultimately lead with enslaving humans into an artificial dimension, pretty much, where it's, they'll be doing like the movie The Matrix, where they have to keep the physical vessels alive, but they're plugged into an artificial simulation because they're harvesting their energy and quantum through the simulation, which will cause visceral reactions in their actual source organic creation body, which is what you see in the Matrix, where they're in these little pods, right? But they're like batteries. I mean, it doesn't get any more perfectly symbolized than the movie The Matrix. That's just the prolonged outcome, where they're enslaving you into an artificial reality, but keep your biology alive, because the biology is what, an artificial, like a video game character, like a sim, for instance. We wouldn't consider that a living being because it's not organic, if you will. It's a hologram, which, partly what we're experiencing is more of like a bioluminescent hologram. But anyway, so they'll have us trapped in that simulated reality, but what will be happening in our body will be just like if we were dreaming, and it feels real, and we have all these experiences and all these things, and they can harness the energy from that. So, I mean, that's sort of like the long-term projected outcome of all this.
Yeah. About the microchips, I haven't looked far into that. I'm curious, are they open about that being part of the plan? Microchipping everyone?
Everything is doublespeak. So they're telling you it's health and safety. Like they use keywords and they use these trickery type of things because they understand how spelling works, if you will, how your word works, and law and all of this type of stuff. So they use things like, if you've looked into Agenda 21, the United Nations Agenda 21, we want healthcare for everyone. We want to preserve the environment. So they paint it in this way that it's this utopian ideology of everything is good for everyone. When you look at what these people are doing, it couldn't be farther from that. But so, for instance, they're going to say it's health and safety of others and keeping people safe. This is the major thing they're doing now, because now it's painting that if you don't go along with what they're telling you to do, which is the New World Order agenda, you're not going along with it, that you don't care about other people, and that you're hateful, and they throw out every slanderous word they can basically come up with for people who are going against the New World Order. And the way they ring the masses into going along with it is making it, you're a good person and you care. And the people who don't go along with it are bad people, and they're selfish, and they're extremists, and they're conspiracy and all of these type of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. So, because I know, like, it's obvious that I've seen plenty of videos where they talk openly about wanting to put out mass vaccinations. That's clear. But when it comes to the microchip itself, I've only really heard people talk about that. Like, I'm just curious if anybody, like, in terms of like Bill Gates or Fauci or whoever's, trying to push this agenda, are they openly saying, yeah, we want to put microchips in everyone's body? Like, or they just use different lingo, or like how open are they about speaking about that?
Say microchips.
Wow.
For instance, in Michigan was the first state to just pass voluntary microchipping of all state employees.
Wow.
So, it all starts as voluntary, just like with the vaccines. Oh, it's voluntary if you get vaccinated or not.
Right.
So it's going to be basically under the guise of a digital ID, which can be used for a multitude of things. It's basically an RFID chip. I don't know if you've seen the microchips. They're like tiny little grains of rice. They implant it right here on your hand. Mm-hmm. So you can just swipe to get in a building, and you can swipe your hand instead of using a credit card. Mm-hmm. And you can access this thing because you have this card. Right. And soon what they're going to be basically playing it up to is first they're going to do it with cell phones. Our cell phones are already like our microchip because they're already in our hand at all times. They're recording everything we do. They're basically logged into AI, which then goes into like D-Wave computers. They're tracking everything. The future androids and artificial intelligence beings are learning everything right now through our phones, which is ironic that they're called androids, and apple, which was the biting of the fruit from the tree. So, these things are being used for stuff already in the future. Mm-hmm. But the whole thing with the digital IDs and the microchips and all that, and they're also, if you hear Bill Gates keeps talking about, we need vaccine certificate. So what better way to have a vaccine certificate than one that you can't remove that's in your hand? So, but first of all, what they're going to do is, first, they got us hooked on technology to where we're addicted to where now most people, 90% of the population, if not more, will not give up their technology, their cell phones, their tablets, their all of it. And they're getting it to the point where you can't refuse technology. Technology is really the mark of the beast if we're going to go there. But so first, they're going to have us have IDs and certificates, and all the stuff's going to be in our phone, so that they're already normalizing it with people with the Apple Pay and the Google Pay and all of this type of crap. So you're scanning. Everything's becoming digitalized. So that's sort of like preliminary stages of normalizing this stuff. And then, so what they will do is then use the cell phones, obviously, because everyone has them. They're already doing this in many places across the world right now, where you have to scan your phone now to go to a restaurant because it's logging you in their database of the contact tracing crap. And so there's that. So the phones will be used, and to the point where they're going to say, oh, it's more convenient and it's more whatever to have the microchip. And it's like, if anything happens to you, we can, just like the reason we microchip animals to take them to the vet. Oh, we have all their health records and all of their stuff. And it's going to come to the point where anti-vaxxers, if we do not, so this is, I'm playing out basically the timeline of people not standing up and rebelling and right. completely overturning what's happening, which, I don't like to be pessimistic, but we're sort of on a barreling train that people are not waking up, and the people who are more conscious or more spiritual, they're choosing to bypass and just say, we're going to be in the fifth dimension without doing anything. And so the trajectory that we are on right now, if nothing changes, is we are going into that dystopic nightmare of a reality. And that should not bring you to a place of fear and powerlessness. It should bring you to the place of stand the fuck up, because this is not the time to sit around waiting anymore. This isn't a joke. This isn't we sit around talking about things and they seem like ideas and conspiracy. This is, you have to wake up. It's no longer a luxury. if the human race does not wake up and stand against what's happening, we're screwed. Quite literally, we're screwed. And we're going to be sucked into the AI dystopic techno-apocalypse, pretty much. So anyways, with the whole thing with the microchips, they're already rolling them out. People are stupid enough to get them, apparently. And it will become more normalized and more normalized to the point where people are not even going to think having a microchip is anything strange. It's just normal. Yep. Just like everything, they slowly condition you to the point where it's like the frog in boiling water analogy.
Yeah.
Put a frog in boiling water, it's going to jump out. You slowly turn the heat up on the frog, it'll die in the boiling water because it hasn't realized how hot the water's gotten because it's slowly acclimatized to the new temperature. Mm-hmm. We are in boiling water at this point, and we're not jumping out. So a lot of people, the microchip, even now, people are not that alarmed by the microchip. You know, I've had people tell me they have conversations with people, and some people say they'll get it. Yeah. So we're at that point where it's not even so alarming that the thought that you're implanting a piece of technology into your body. So it's already happening. And if you look into Michigan specifically, they already started rolling out the microchipping basically thing. And if you look into the Microsoft 060606 patent, it's basically they're going to use it for digital mining of currencies, which means literally, like if you read in the Bible, if you will, the Revelation chapter where they say, no man will be able to buy or sell land, trade, rich or poor, without the mark of the beast or the number that stands for his name. Basically, this is what they use. So how convenient that, you know, Microsoft patents a thing that's basically about mining currency, which means that that's how currency will be traded digitally. Your credits will be transferred from this thing to this thing using humans as a mining source. Mm-hmm. They named the patent 060606. So it's in your face. They use the symbolism. They use all of these things to reinforce the giant spell, if you will, that they're casting that has been going on for thousands of years. And it's really, people need to wake up at this point.
Mm-hmm. I've also heard, and I feel like I've understood this intuitively before, like in a higher state of consciousness just made sense to me, but I don't know if I could explain it now. So I'm curious if you could enlighten me on it. But I remember hearing that the people that are in control and doing this, it's kind of part of their contract that they kind of have to make it obvious to us by doing things like making the patents 060606 or even the Trace Act. I'm sure you've heard of that, where they're just trying to make it so they can just come in our houses and be like, you got a cough, you're coming with me. That's like the Trace Act 6666 or something like that. It's just got an extra 6. But the idea behind it is that they can't have it completely clandestine. It's got to be out in the open to some degree. So I'm curious why that is.
Because it's a universal law. It's a universal law that they have to abide by because they understand these universal laws. They understand these spiritual laws. It's the law of free will. So if they put it in the open, they do it in covert ways that they're basically just on the edge of violating our free will, which from our perspective, we would say our free will has been violated. But on a universal level, they've done a lot of trickery to get it to the point where they are able to do what they've been doing. So we're at the point now, because as human consciousness increases, their exposure of the stuff has to become more obvious. Because if not, then they violate free will, and then that's not allowed. Basically, their stuff will fall apart. And I mean, we understand how the universe is one, and the mind creates reality. So their power will diminish if they don't follow these universal laws. I mean, then there's a multitude of things you could say will happen if they don't follow these universal laws. So they basically have to put it out there so that by allowing it to happen in consent through ignorance is a real thing. Because if you're seeing something, then it's in your reality, it's stored in your subconscious mind. And if you allow it to go on, whether it's because you're too stupid to know better, you're still agreeing to it and you're allowing it, so it's not in violation of your free will. So there is no divine intervention on that. So a lot of these people are just saying, I just focus positively and everything's going to work out fine. That's not really in alignment with these universal laws, which is that you're consenting to those things. You know, you can be in your delusion of just saying, well, I know the higher truths of it all. But you can know the higher truths of it all, but how are you going to feel if you're being detained or tortured or you're being enslaved into an artificial reality? then, it's like, at what point are you going to choose to deal with the reality that you're experiencing in the now versus grasping onto these higher truths because you don't want to deal with the reality you're experiencing now? So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I know we touched briefly on the idea that like we're basically moving away from a cash system and then everything's going to be digital. So in terms of stuff like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and stuff like that, is there, like, for lack of a better term, good behind that? Is that a way to get away? Is that a way to escape from the matrix? Or is it just the New World Order's new way of controlling us with digital currency?
It can be either or. So, I mean, it's not just one thing. We can't just create a cryptocurrency and then think that all of the other corruption and power is just going to fade away and we just go along with this new cryptocurrency. They'll hijack the cryptocurrency. They have all the money in the world. What do you think? They can't go out and buy now cryptocurrencies?
Right.
So the whole thing is that we need to overturn this system. The system needs to be overturned. We can't just like be polite and go and do our own thing to the side. Like we were talking about in the beginning about the off-grid. They don't want the off-grid happening. They don't want free currencies happening. They don't want humans being free. We are there. They view us like how most people view farmed animals. You're their chattel. You're their resource. So they're not just going to let their cattle go running out into the wilderness to live happily ever after. They're going to do everything they can to make sure you end up in that slaughterhouse.
Right.
So it's important to realize that when we're dealing with things like cryptocurrencies and off-grid and all of these type of things, which they are the more aligned thing to do because they're in alignment with sovereignty and this type of stuff. But if we don't deal with the grand apparatus, which is this giant cabal network of psychopaths that are infiltrated every aspect of human life and beyond human life, then these things can just easily be crashed or co-opted and hijacked to further their agendas. So while cryptocurrencies is not a bad idea, it's just that if we don't deal with the system at large, the cryptocurrencies is not going to matter. We need to overturn this entire thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question I have for you is that a lot of people in this realm of conspiracy, I wish there was a better word that came to my mind for that. Alternative theories, I guess, or just the truth. Who knows?
Reality.
Yeah. But just to give an example, one of the most prominent figures in this realm, David Icke, everything he says, for the most part, I'm like, yep, that sounds right to me. But then there's a couple things that I question, especially the idea that he says that the climate change or global warming, whatever you want to call it, is completely a hoax. And it's a way for them to move into more control, to tax certain corporations and stuff like that. So the people in charge can have more control. But to me, yeah, I can see that how somebody would co-opt that and be like, I want to use this to control people. But at the same time, it just seems logical to me that the rate at which we're pumping harmful gases into the atmosphere does have an effect on our air and the climate of the world in general. Like that just seems like scientifically accurate to me. I'm no scientist, so I don't know for sure. But that's one thing that makes me wonder when he says that it's a complete hoax. I get that the powers that be are co-opting it for their own agenda, but I'm curious if there's actual truth to the idea that yes, we are ruining our atmosphere, ruining the ozone, melting the ice caps. Is that actually going on, or is it going on in a way smaller degree than we're being told just to control us more? So I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah. So the thing we got to look at is climate change versus environmental destruction are sort of two different things. So climate change is a hoax. The Earth is constantly going through heating and cooling periods. The Earth can wipe us out and it would return to a natural state of wholeness. So if you look back into the 70s, for instance, they were saying the Great Ice Age is coming. We're all going to die. And now what are we dealing with 50 years later? Global warming, we're all going to die. So it's a constant, they're constantly using, the Earth is a living being. We're dealing with basically, we go through heating periods, we go through this, we go through that. So the whole thing with climate change, as far as humans causing the climate change, and they obviously they're piggybacking on the fact that we're openly destroying our entire environment. We're destroying our planet. And the same people who are doing that are now telling us, oh, climate change, when they're the ones doing it. So it's, again, a nuanced conversation. So the whole issue with people will say about CO2, the more CO2 released into the air, the more that the plants will grow. This is just how it is. It'll form more plant life. It supports more plant life, and then the plant life will then naturally balance it out by creating more oxygen. So, that should be out of the question. I mean, it's sort of crazy to think, oh, the CO2. It's like the more CO2 there is, not that I agree with things like factory farming and chemicals and pollution. These things need to stop. But this is where they're piggybacking off. If they know these massive corrupt things that they are the ones supporting and sponsoring are creating, environmental problems. But it's not to say that nature doesn't balance these things out, or that we're the ones causing the ice caps to melt. When ice caps melt, they freeze up, they melt. This is what goes on for all of thousands of years on a planet. This is nothing new. It's just when you take people who live in this short time period and they see, whoa, the stuff's melting. This is climate change. It's climate change. It's like, yes, the climate's always changing. It's living. It's always, everything that's alive is constantly in a state of change. Right. And there are cycles and there are all these type of things. So I think the problem is people are not, again, it's black and white. It's either climate change doesn't exist or it exists and it's all human made. Climate is changing. It's always changing. I mean, this shouldn't need to be explained. We understand how ice ages and warming periods and solar maximus and all these type of things exist. But the thing is environmental destruction is a totally different category. So we're chopping down all the forests. We're poisoning the oceans. That does need to be addressed because we're going to kill the planet because of that, not because it's going to heat up and it's this whole thing. We're killing the planet openly because we're, and it's when we say we, it's the mega corporations and it's all these huge, massive corrupt entities like the animal agriculture industry and the petroleum industry and the pharmaceutical industry and all of the byproducts of the petroleum industry, the gas, the oil companies, creating plastic and chemicals and all of these things, which is basically like things opening Pandora's box. When you're creating things like plastics and all of these things, there are ways to heal from them. Like, they come out with these bacteria that can eat plastic and all that, but you're opening Pandora's box. So sitting here thinking that the United Nations and all of these type of things, which allow these corporations to get away with it, are now basically the ones who open Pandora's box are going to be the ones to close it, it's sort of ridiculous. So environmental destruction, yes, needs to be addressed. Thinking that humans and we're responsible for the planet's heating and cooling is ridiculous. The planet is always heating and cooling. When we create more carbon dioxide, more plants will grow, and that will create more oxygen. So if you were to take a plant in an environment where there was not a lot of CO2, it grows much shorter. It doesn't basically grow as much and become as expansive as it would if it were in an extremely CO2 rich environment, because that's their oxygen. So the more CO2 we create, the more basically air that the plants have, and then they can grow faster and it restores balance back to nature. So CO2 is not the issue. It's more of like chemicals, destroying the environment, polluting the environment, all of these type of things. So it's sort of a conversation that needs to be, again, nuanced. It's not that we're not affecting the planet. We are fucking destroying it openly. And when I say we, governments and corporations that have been openly destroying it since the Industrial Revolution because of profits and other insidious agendas like controlling agendas. So that's my take on that one.
Yeah. So my thought on that is I completely agree. I understand the cycles of the earth. It does get warmer, colder all the time. But just from what I've seen and what my thought on it, I guess, was that it seemed to me that we were accelerating it by pumping more CO2 in the air. And I get the concept of more CO2, bigger, more plants. Makes sense. But is that not making it harder for humans to live in that scenario?
Yeah. Well,
so the planet's going to be fine. That's the idea behind it, right? The planet's going to be fine, but we are, by pumping thousands of tons of CO2 from our cars and animal agriculture and all these other sources into the air at a constant rate every single day. It seems to me that we're making it harder for us to adapt. The plants will be fine. The planet in general will be fine. But by creating that imbalanced atmosphere, then we are making it harder for us to acclimatize to it. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. And that's directly in alignment with these psychopaths thing, which is they are anti-life. They don't care about the planet. They don't care about animals. Right. They don't care about humans. They don't even plan on staying around. They're going to go underground like they always do during cataclysms, or they just take off and they don't even deal with it, with the repercussions of it. So if we allow this same ruling class that is destroying the planet openly through not allowing free energy and clean energy technologies to arise that are not under the guise of the United Nations, Agenda 21, which is, let's have electric cars so they can't leave cities and they're dependent on, obeying government rules. So this is the problem. They co-opt everything. So the whole green movement is co-opt. It's not some natural thing that these people care. These people profit off of slavery, off of oil industry, off of petroleum, which also is what creates plastic, which is destroying the oceans and polluting the earth for hundreds and thousands of years to come if we don't deal with it. So these people don't care about life. Like, remember I was saying they're as disconnected as you can get? Yeah. They literally don't care. They will chop down every last tree, kill every last animal, and they will not care at that point. They still won't care. So it comes to the point where we have to take responsibility, shut the corporations down, shut these big things down. But people aren't going there because they feel powerless, that they can't do anything about it. So it's sort of like, yes, we're exaggerating what we would call the global heating and cooling with the way that we live. But it's like we need to get to the root of it, not just create more laws and create this or that. Shut down the corporations completely. They need to be disbanded. Corporations are non-living entities. This is why they get away with murder. This is why they get away with not paying taxes and all of these other type of things. And when you're dealing with people who are beyond billionaires, they don't give a shit about being higher taxed because they own it, because all the money comes right back to them anyways. So allowing them to keep, just taxing stuff that shouldn't exist, like the petroleum industry, for instance, and war manufacturing, blowing shit up definitely affects the planet. So all of these things have to be addressed. Not just, we're going to make a carbon tax and I go to the store with a green bag now and I feel good about myself. It's just retarded. It's like we're dealing with it at the absolute lowest level. And then what are you putting in your green bag at the grocery store? A carcass that contributed to some, mass destruction of the environment. And it's all wrapped in plastic, and then the plastic's being thrown out. So it's just like, you're dealing with, it's like the simplest mentality of these issues. And this is what gets the most attention because the average person is an imbecile, basically. Right.
So, so the way in which we're dealing with it on like a federal level or whatever, a governmental level, is pretty much futile. But it's still necessary to abolish the burning of fossil fuels. That's still fair to say that we're doing a lot of damage because of that. Even though, like you said, carbon dioxide can be beneficial for the earth itself, it's not necessarily beneficial for us to have an imbalance of that. And this is the way I kind of understood it too. Like for me, in a closed system, if you pump in more CO2 and there's CO2 and oxygen and argon and all those different chemicals, then if you have a surplus of CO2, then you're going to create more agitation. There's going to be more spirals, in our terms, that would mean like more hurricanes, more extreme weather in general. That's what makes sense to me. So when I hear someone like David Icke say it's just all a hoax, I feel like he should preface it by saying, the way they're purporting it to be is essentially a hoax, but we still need to get rid of fossil fuels. We still need to get rid of the dumping of oil in the waters. And because I think of I know this is not the most reputable source, it's a Netflix series like Planet Earth. You'll have David Attenborough talk about how just like 5-10 years ago, we had these lush green places where animals were thriving. And then just in the last 5 or 10 years, it's completely destitute. And because of, I guess, probably multiple factors, but CO2 being one of them. and the production of methane and all kinds of other things. So it's still necessary, regardless of whether or not what they're saying as global warming or climate change is a hoax. We still need to get rid of the burning of fossil fuels, and we still need to get rid of animal agriculture, because that's having a major impact on many different levels. That'd be fair to say?
Yeah, that's sort of, I think, where he's sort of, and I'm guilty of this also, is when you're looking at things from the highest level, and that's what you're speaking out, but people don't have any information between what you're saying and then whatever they're being told, it sort of seems dismissive. But so I understand, because he's, I've seen some things and he's just like, and I agree, it is a hoax. Climate change is a hoax. They're completely distorting, manipulating information in order to serve their agenda. Right. While they're the same people pumping chemicals and destroying the environment and not allowing for free energy technology to actually come out. The only time they're going to release basically electric cars when 5G is up, so that they can control where the electric cars go. And then if you decide to go against basically the Agenda 2030, which is you have to stay in your little human farm city so we can control you, then your car will just shut off, or there'll be driverless cars. So it's not going to be like this liberating, freeing thing if we keep giving our power away to these same people causing all the problems. Free energy is always in existence. It's just a matter of tapping into it. But specifically with Tesla, he already discovered free energy, and and people come out with little miniature free energy devices or different ways to deal with stuff, and they get shut down, they get destroyed, they get killed. I mean, so it's sort of like asking cancer to cure cancer, and then cancer has a movement against cancer. It's ludicrous. So, we have to take our power back. There is no giving our power away to external things, and then we're listening to their science and their information and think that that's the truth when it couldn't be farther from it.
So yeah, the main point is that we can't depend on the governments and the institutions to bring us a greener world. We have to basically, stop supporting them, so they have the power and the money to create these systems. Like, they may start to move towards more greener type solutions, but they'll do it in a way that still allows them their control.
Well, for enslavement, it's not going to be because they care. They're the ones keeping us from living in a green world.
Yeah, exactly.
So instead of asking them to now create the green world, we just got to remove them.
Yes.
It's not super complex. So the only reason they're even moving toward a green world ideology is because it can be used for enslavement. Right. So all of anything that they come out with, it's to move us toward enslavement and limiting freedom. Has nothing to do with liberation. Just like I've been calling out the different movements, the feminist movement, Black Lives Matter, the LGBT movement, the climate change movement, all of these things, there's a little, they start with a good intention, and they completely hijack it toward basically fueling their own agendas.
Right.
Feminism was used to create a war between between men and women, destroy the family unit. There was a pure intention behind feminism. Give women equal rights. Shouldn't even have to be explained.
Right.
And then you got the Black Lives Matter movement. Give people equal rights. Stop killing people and stop the dramas. What is it being used for? Divide and conquer race war. The LGBT movement. Realize there are people having different experiences with sexuality and identities and all these types of things. Let them live. Don't give them equal rights again.
Yeah.
And it's being all now forced into transgenderism, transhumanism. Sexual confusion, they're chemically mutating us with chemicals that are messing up our chromosomes, and then create a movement that's telling them it's liberating to not know what you are and to do all of these type of things. So, and it's the same with the climate change. It's like clearly humans see, we're chopping down forests, we're throwing plastic and creating giant landfills and dumps, and we're killing billions of animals, which are then polluting the air we breathe in, the water we drink, and and then we're killing all the animals in the ocean. So it's like the simplest level mentality of it. Those things are bad. They need to be addressed. And then you're now asking the people who contributed to all of the problems to be the solution.
Yeah.
It's the most ass backwards, disempowered place to be in. So it's like all of the problems are going to be solved by us reclaiming our own power. Yep. And then standing in unity with people to create the changes, not by voting, not by government. The entire thing needs to be overturned. And if we do not do that soon, it's not going to be good. The closer we get to basically basically merging with machines or merging with AI, which we're very close to. I would say it's within the next 10 years. And some people integrate into machinery before then. The closer we get to that, the harder. It's almost like we're saying the further these people are away from consciousness and the further they are out, that it's going to get that much harder for us to come out of the hole, because the hole is going to get very deep and very steep, and it's going to be nearly impossible to get out of it. So we need to really get our asses in gear, like right now. We should have already had our asses in gear, and the water's only ever getting hotter, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with that being said, aside from like what you're doing in terms of like, spreading this truth and trying to start your own community, what are some other ways in which we can start to move towards our own sovereignty?
The spreading the information needs to be top priority, because the problem is there's not enough people aware of the problem for it to be addressed. Because what happens if you get one person standing up, they get squashed. So we need the numbers. And so the sharing the information is important, but it also needs to be done on an actual physical level, which is why they're doing the social distance and the lockdown, because they're trying to stop the actual revolution and the uprising.
Right.
There are places like Lebanon, they're burning down central banks. These people have a better understanding of what the real problem is. They're not fighting with white people and gay people and black people. They're going for the root of it, the parasite, which is the central banking systems, which are the government. It's like you're begging the system to stop systematic racism when it's the system that supports them. So it's retarded. It's literally like asking cancer to cure cancer.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. But so obviously sharing the information is important. Uniting with people, getting over petty differences with people, finding out. Remember, I was saying it's like we still have not found out a way to integrate and unite. This is a key problem. It's once the ego separates off and it gets stuck in all of its little fixtures, it's not learning how to become more open and allowing and stuff so that it can unify again.
Right.
So we need to share the information, which is light. We need to unify, which is the love. And then we need to completely stand up in our power and revolt. We need to take these things out. I mean, it's that extreme, because what we're dealing with is that extreme. It's not a simple way anymore where it's just like, we just petition for things and do the petitioning, do all of it. But it's going to come to the point where we have to overturn these things. We need to stop using our currency. We need to stop paying taxes. We need to overthrow our governments completely. It sounds dramatic and extreme, but what we're dealing with, because we're the frogs in boiling water, we think this is normal. We grow up with a government system and central banking and taxes, so we think this is all normal. This is not normal. This is extremely parasitic, extremely inverted. It's basically an entire Luciferian system running the entire world. So what we have to do is an extreme action. And becoming aware is a big part of that. So sharing the information is so important. There are people who write me like, oh, well, we can't do nothing. And all they have on their thing is nature pictures. It's like, yeah, nature's beautiful, but how about sharing the information? Having the conversations with your friends and family, whether you look crazy or not. Because if we do not get the numbers up to a certain degree, it's a game over for us. And that's just the unpleasant truth of it. And that has to impact you to the degree where you're willing to put everything on the line, including your reputation, including everything, to share the information to wake people up.
Right.
Because we are one with those sheep wearing masks, running around like lunatics who are going to go and get vaccinated. So, and we need to diversify our tactics of trying to wake people up. And everyone will affect certain people, but everyone has to step up who knows what's going on. If you know the grand scheme of what's going on, you need to step up in some form of fashion and make it impactful, not watered down, not politically correct and socially, getting you approval and stuff like this. It needs to be done, and everyone will have a unique way of doing this. Everyone's message is going to be different. Everyone's unique light is different, but everyone needs to step up and stand up right now. This is no longer the time to stay quiet and be a sheep because you're scared of people calling you names or whatever stupid crap it is that's keeping you from speaking up.
Holy shit, man. Well said. Yeah, it's definitely true. Yeah, we all need to share the truth in some way, form, some shape, form, or another. Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious. What do you think their next big move is? Because you have what I've often heard referred to as the alliance. I don't know. I've heard this spouted by Q people, and I don't necessarily agree with their approach and the things they say, but they do share some truth. And they talk about like how there's the deep state versus the alliance, and in the alliance, their move now is basically, the whole bringing out the information about the pedophilia and how that's rampant throughout all of our institutions. So obviously there's going to be some sort of resistance to that. There's going to be some other big move. COVID was a big move. Black Lives Matter was a big move. So I'm just curious, like, what do you see as their next big move to silence us or to keep us more afraid or to put us back in our fear mindset?
Pandemic 2. They're already telling you about it. I mean, it's going to be bigger than the first one. It's going to kill more people, whether they release some type of biological hazardous thing that's going to make people sick, whether it's the 5G that's turned on now that they've rolled it out all summer. They've been working on it for 3 months. Like, on top of it, I mean, they are rolling this stuff out so fast, throwing up towers everywhere. So it's going to be the pandemic too. Imagine what this did, and this is with what, a 0.04, 0.02, whatever percent death rate. Imagine when something's killing more people, or seemingly something is killing more people, what they're going to be able to get away with. They've completely restructured our entire society to where now not seeing people with a mask is rare, and they're putting plastic shields everywhere. There's social distancing nonsense. Most stuff, at least here in the US, is still shut down. You can't go in most places. Nothing is normal at all. It's a total nightmare going out in public. I can't even go out in public. I get a headache. I'm drained. It's depressing. And if they did all of that with something that was basically all a psychological hoax, there was really nothing unusual other than the regular flu season or anything. It was basically this hocus pocus type of ordeal that completely made all of this stuff happen. Imagine if there is something actually killing people more and it's actually tangible. It's not a bunch of news stories and statistics driving up fear. It's actual deaths. They're going to be able to get away with a lot more, including forced vaccinations. And the forced vaccinations is going to bring about we're going to deal with pandemic 2. There's going to be a civil war. Basically, this is in the U.S., which the U.S. is a major catalyst for the rest of the world because we're one of the only people who have guns left. And with guns, like I said, is boundaries. So long as there are people who have their boundaries intact, who aren't completely infringed upon, that gives sort of hope to other people. And there are people without guns who are still ready to stand up. Look in Hong Kong, Lebanon, and Ecuador. There are people burning down central banks. There are people openly trying to overthrow the government entirely, not voting for new fucking parties or, trying to petition for things. They're trying to overthrow the entire system so that they can start with a new civil council or whatever is the plan in these places. So it's just a mess. So I would say the pandemic part 2, which we're basically beginning into now because it was pandemic 1, start the race riots, which is going to serve into after pandemic 2, which will be longer and more impactful. Then they're going to bring in the full-on civil war, which will probably be like the purge. These things may happen coinciding with one another, just like now COVID and the race war drama is inciting with one another. It'll be just like Pikachu into Raichu is basically what they're doing with the COVID is going to be pandemic 2 COVID. And then the race war is going to be like the big civil war. Yeah. And then it's a full on, it's a physical war. It's a spiritual war. It's a mental war. And, I don't know. Sometimes I'm optimistic and I remember what I'm here for. And I think the human race can turn it around. And then there are other times where I'm just like, the average person has been so dumbed down. It's almost like they're already in a hive mind computer and they don't think for themselves and they can't access free thought. So it's an interesting experience being here at this time.
Yeah, friggin' right, man. Holy shit. Do you see Project Bluebeam as a future possibility?
Yeah, they've been planning Project Bluebeam for a while. I'm sure they're excited to test that one out.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. I mean, they'll just keep pulling out more and more crap as they can. But the thing with Project Bluebeam is they need to have 5G already completely installed for that to be a success. Because you can beam things into people's mind. I mean, they can beam it into your mind. I remember in New York City when I was about, I don't know, 14 or 15. So this was probably around 2004, 2005. I was walking in New York City and there was a billboard and I was just walking down the sidewalk. And then all of a sudden I hear something and you think it's an audible sound because it's like, hey, you're not crazy. Look up, look at this billboard. And then the billboard's telling you it's beaming something into your mind, hearing this. So it wasn't a sound. It wasn't an audible sound. It was literally beaming it into my mind. And it was me and my aunt and my brother were like, oh, that's weird. This is before I really had a full on awakening.
Right.
Or that I would see something like that as sort of scary and just like, oh, that's cool. Innovative technology. I thought it was fucking weird because it's totally invasive. It's voice to skull technology where you're hearing something. And it was very weird because the way, and we're all talking about it, we're like, well, what did it sound like to you? We're like, I don't know. It just sounded like it was talking. And it was like, was it a woman's voice? My aunt's like, yeah, it was a woman's voice to me. But I was like, I don't know. I can't remember what it was now. It was so fucking weird. So anyways, so the whole point of that story is that it's short frequency. So you start hearing this thing talking to you, but you had to be in a certain distance. So the same thing with the blue beam, which they can use it for a multitude of things. Everyone just saying, oh, a fake alien invasion or whatever. They can use it for that. But they can also use it for the return of Christ. They can make people appear that Jesus is coming to them and telling them do this or that, and that do this or that may be something fueling right into their agenda.
Right, right.
They can say, oh, Jesus has returned and he told me to get microchipped. It's like they can come up with some ridiculous crap. But because people have this religious indoctrination, they'll believe they're seeing Jesus and that's what he told them to do. And so they do it. So, there's a multitude of things they can do with Bluebeam, and Bluebeam will be our everyday reality. It's not like it'll be this one event that happens and it'll be an ongoing event because the technology is in place for them to do that.
Do you think there are benevolent extraterrestrial races that are essentially watching over us, but pretty much following the prime directive? If you're familiar with Star Trek, they don't interfere with our society on a deep level unless we're ready for it, kind of thing. Do you think they're watching over us, making sure in a sense that, well, not making sure, but trying to guide us through to our spiritual evolution, and they are assisting us in this spiritual war, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely. But the thing is, it's sort of like, remember we're talking about the law of free will. They don't interfere with the law of free will. So it's sort of like, imagine how we play The Sims, for instance. We can tell the Sim, go over there and make dinner, but the Sim may not feel like it and he'll go run to the toilet because he needs to poop. Right. So it's sort of like that with these other beings. They can see what's going on. They can offer, pushes and guidance and stuff. But to think they're just going to come like and beam down and like, we are the good one, that's totally against it because the consciousness level of our planet is nowhere near ready for that. And it would be more, and this is why they've also been priming people with these alien invasions, evil people from the sky type of dramas, because it's making people scared of anything other than, anything. The people are scared of different colors of skin and it's ridiculous. So they're not going to be really interfering. It's subtly. This is what you're getting with some of the channeling and, some people are having, sort of, I don't know, people call it out-of-body experience. I don't even like that term because it's not accurate to what's actually happening. But they could be having experiences with these beings and stuff like that. You can already communicate with them if you know how to do that. So it's not going to be this whole, they show up and they're bringing utopia to Earth and they stop the bad guys. That's not how this works. This is our thing. It's like you don't take a pile of shit and then think someone else is going to come. No one's going to be eager to come clean up your pile of shit. They'll tell you how to clean up your pile of shit. They'll tell you there's a pile of shit. They'll tell you there are people who are manipulating your pile of shit, but they're not going to come and clean up your shit for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the way I was kind of seeing it was that, like, if they do go through a Project Bluebeam and then everybody on Earth thinks that aliens exist, they're aware that they exist on a deeper level, then at that point, since the consciousness is already aware of the fact that there are other, beings out there, then the benevolent ones may come down and not necessarily, hey, say we're here to fix you, but then they might be like, we're here, but in order for you to ascend, you guys got to work with us. That's the way I kind of see it, is that they'll make themselves available and say, this is the truth of the things. This race of aliens is trying to control you. The ones that say, get microchipped or whatever, don't listen to them. We're here to tell you that you're all gods. We're all the same being. And in order for us to actually win this, you guys have to recognize your true power and stand up for your rights. So, and in that scenario, I can see them making themselves known, but they're still not going to do the work for us. They're just going to call us to action more so, rather than just watching from the heavens and hoping that we kind of do it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And something that people have to realize is these beings are operating at a completely higher level of consciousness that we can't comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
So their interaction with us right now is purely of a vibrational thing.
Right.
Even if they came out with a fake alien invasion and stuff, and that got people's consciousness to the place where, other things exist, it still doesn't get their consciousness to the place of even understanding the level that they operate in.
Mm-hmm.
So waiting on extraterrestrials to help us it's a waste of time. Mm-hmm. We have people who still just watch the Kardashians and they're like people eating squirrels in the backwoods. Like the fact that we think aliens are going to be shown up to help it is just not, at this point, it's just so far in the realm of possibilities that it's not worth even acknowledging. Because until we get to a certain vibrational place, everyone, not just some of us, there will be not some mass intervention of any sort.
Mm-hmm.
It's the intervention, the connection with other beings is happening already in this psychic type of way. It's not they're going to show up here as if they could just exist on this planet with our atmosphere and all of these type of things, which they can. That's why you don't really see them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of, people watch too many sci-fi movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. So, what was it? Okay. I feel like we covered so much, man. Holy shit. What was the other thing? Okay. Yeah. I wanted to talk about what you think of misinformation campaigns. Like, what, if any, of the conspiracy theories do you consider to be completely just false, that they're pushing just to make it seem like all conspiracy theories are false?
QAnon. I mean, I guess that's the main one. And it's not that it seems like all conspiracy theories are false. It's capturing people who are at a certain level of awareness, who are just waking up, and they hear about the children.
Right.
And then they think they just want to, because they don't want that to exist, that what's happening with the satanic child abuse of children, they're just buying into this movement because the movement's telling them everything they want to hear.
Right.
Although there's really no proof to suggest any of what they're saying is happening. And quite the contrary, that even people like Trump, who's just another puppet, who's supporting all of the stuff that is going on, all of the agendas to the T, and then you also play into the savior complex of, I don't have to take responsibility, and this character who literally plays by the Zionist agenda to the T is going to save you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's ridiculous. I also think flat Earth is another one that is sort of used to create this divide in the community, to where it's like, if you believe in round Earth, you're an idiot. And then conversely, the other people say, oh, well, you're an idiot if you believe in flat Earth and this and that. So that one is hugely divisive and is causing another rift. And then people who are just learning more conscious things, then they hear flat Earth and they're like, oh, okay, well, it's all dumb bullshit. These people believe the Earth is flat.
Right.
So there's many disinformation campaigns, but I think the good thing about those on, the flip side is that it teaches you to tune into your own intuition and to develop discernment and to really, if false prophets serve a great purpose and deception serves a great purpose, because it leads you to go inward because there's nowhere else to go. There's no more documentaries you can watch. There's no more stuff you can watch. You have to go inwards and start tuning in to figuring out. And that's how you're accessing your intuition, because it's so subtle. You have to tune into those things because you can be easily deceived by the outside world and stuff like that. So if anything, there's a silver lining to those agendas and those things as well.
Yeah. One thing that you said in one of your lives that I was hoping you could explain as well is that I think you prefaced it by saying our galaxy is doomed. And then you also said something along the lines of there shouldn't be black holes at the center of our galaxy. I'm curious why that is.
So, God, that's a big subject. I definitely, anyone on here, I encourage you to go look up Ashayana Dean. She goes like ham to the maximum degree. And there's also another account now on Instagram who shares a lot of stuff from Ashayana Dean, and he seems very well versed in a lot of the stuff, more so than I do. Angelic Humanity. And especially he has a recent video that I'm trying to share and it's not letting me. My phone crashes every time. It's frustrating. But that's just, it's a lot to go into that one. I don't know how far we're going to get with that, but basically we're not supposed to have black holes in a living system. So it all goes down to sort of this Luciferian or this anti-life or this parasitic, vampiric type of thing, which all goes off to basically sucking off of energy, off of life force energy, as opposed to radiating life force energy. Those are the two basically polarizing things. So you have like source energy or living organic structures of consciousness that radiate from within. They radiate life force energy. Then you have, which are also a part of source, but like we said, it's so far away from it. And it's basically what we call on the edge of creation, if you will, is that it's these anti-life things, which are basically parasitic. They don't want to exist off of pure source life force because they're sort of opposing it. But the reality is they're a part of it and they can't not live without it. So they have to suck off of it as like vampires or parasites. And this goes onto higher levels, basically, planetarily wise and solar system wise and galactically wise, to where they created these entire vortexes that which they basically serve as sort of like wormholes to parallel realities and stuff like that, but they're fallen realities. So when you go through basically certain wormholes, for instance, are always taking you to lower matrices as opposed to taking you to higher or parallel or adjacent type of vibrational matrices. So with a wormhole or a black hole, for instance, you're basically going to be transported into another. It's just so complex. I mean, it goes into such a level that it almost seems like a mathematical equation, the way that these things work. Mm-hmm. But it's either a positive or a negative, like a going up or a going down type of thing. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing with what's going on in our realm is, in our galaxy specifically, is that the entire thing is being is in a fallen system, basically, where it's like it's fallen off the edge. It's just a matter before it hits the ground, pretty much. So when we say of these star seeds and light works and stuff, we're trying to get as much of the consciousness to ascend to the point where we're like, let's choose a new reality. Let's choose to go to a new experience. We don't want to be on the falling, the falling rock anymore, basically. And that's happening on our planet. Obviously, we can see it playing out. But then it's also happening on the bigger level, which is our galaxy. And then if you hear some of the theories that we're supposed to collide with Andromeda, this is why Andromedans even have anything to do with us, is because they're trying to stop that from happening. Because we're basically, it's just sucking all of that. And it all goes down to energy. And that's what we call like quantum, which is just like the singular little unit of consciousness that is energy is quantum. So it's trying to suck all the quantum of this entire thing as, like a vampiric thing, like how say we eat an animal to steal their life force to give it to ourselves to sustain us. Mm-hmm. This is dealing with an entire like galactic level of trying to keep an entire fallen system in place by sucking all the life of this thing. And then it then can go on to feed off of it for a while, and then it's like it's very complicated. I don't know how to explain it. I'm not the most. I can understand it in a way that's not very logical, but to explain it logically is just not my expertise.
Yeah, fair enough. I understand that. Yeah, because I don't like. I could be wrong in this, but I think like I thought that all galaxies in our universe have a black hole at the middle. And
no, so
they don't.
This comes from the thing that our science is very outdated. It's very limited, and it's also distorted. It's also like the flower of life, which I've called out before. The flower of life represents a finite structure. It's the stopping of evolution. And so the issue when you look through the lens of the science and the things like the Fibonacci spiral and all that, it's all based within the context of a fallen system. So yes, when you look at and examine every particle within the fallen inverted system, you're going to see more evidence of a fallen inverted system, and you're calling it normal and natural, and this is how everything is in all other galaxies, and it's just not the reality. So basically, and not that science has a clue, because they're so far behind as far as most stuff is concerned. It's supposed to be, it's not that, so black holes, we're just calling it that because of the way it's perceived through telescope and all of this type of things. They're basically like giant portals. They're like central suns in the middle of these things, which act as basically like gates. So you can access this way, you can go this way, you can go this way to parallel realities. So basically a replica of this galaxy, but in a different context, or you can go to a completely different thing. You can go into different realities. And the whole thing is it's all transverse through consciousness. It's not like this Star Wars-y thing where, not that that doesn't exist, where you're just flying around in little, devices and stuff like that. It's all portals through consciousness that act as like an interconnected web of things. But to try and grasp it from our current perspective is very, very difficult. So at the center of all galaxies, there is going to be these giant portals, basically. But so the difference is basically stargates versus wormholes. Stargates gives you access to go to things in a ascending timeline, basically, or parallel to not where you're being sucked into more things that are based off of decaying or parasitism or whatever. And it's all a degree. It's all, like I said, it's not black and white. It's a whole entire spectrum. So the whole thing with the black holes is you can only go parallel to other fallen systems, which then you may have access to get to ascending systems or living systems, or you go lower. So the problem with wormholes and black holes basically is you can go to other fallen systems or you go lower. So with other ones, for instance, that are not basically wormholes or black holes, you would have, I don't know what else we would call them other than black holes. It's still like, if you were to perceive it as a thing, it's just like the center of the thing is a vortex. But it would take you to either an adjacent or an ascending thing. So it's very complicated. I encourage, if this at all is interesting to you, to go look up Asha and Nadine. It can be very depressing learning this, because if we think what's experienced here is depressing on this level, it goes up, and it's a bigger level of sort of depressing. But it's very interesting, and it's liberating, because then you have a higher perspective of it. And then also, like we said, at the end of the day, it's all a big cosmic game. But it is very sort of disturbing to learn a certain level of the information, where it goes into basically multidimensional energy harvesting and gigantic levels of corruption that exist beyond just the little humanoid dramas.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I do want to look more into that for sure, because to me, it always kind of seemed like a neutral thing. I didn't see black holes. I always did perceive them ever since my awakening experience. It just kind of made sense to me that black holes would just lead us to some other universe. The way I've seen it is that like it would come down to the singularity where no matter can pass through, but just information in formations of waves can still go through. But then that would just be connections for us to go to other universes. But I never necessarily seen black holes as a connection to a lower vibrational universe. I just seen them to different universes. But then again, it's all one universe anyways, but I just kind of seen them as pathways, kind of like a portal, like you said, opening up. But if at the center of a galaxy, you had something that was a portal into something higher, an ascension type of thing, would it still be perceived the same way? How do we know that the black holes we are seeing at the center of our galaxy is something that is bringing us into the negative? And is it that all those stars are eventually going to be sucked into that hole? Like, if it was the opposite, would they be pushing them out?
Because you start dealing with timelines and parallels and all of this type of stuff. So, it's like this, we see the stars in the sky and they appear to be the same thing for thousands of years. In our short little time span of our perception, we're not seeing them. It's just so complicated because I don't like how most people discuss timelines, because it's such a narrow way, but I also know it's just so complicated to explain it. It's just so complicated. It's sort of, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not good at explaining it. It's it's so complicated to explain. It's just complicated. I've tried explaining it as, think of like a giant fiber optic cable. So all throughout here is a bunch of tiny fiber optics. If you see what we're currently perceiving as one fiber optic cable, and then it can constantly shift between all of these possibilities, so that so the one we're in now, in this one here, it could be a completely different thing. You could be having a completely different experience of sort of like a parallel type of. It's just too complex. I'm not good at it. I'll probably cause more confusion by trying to vocalize it. So I don't even want to go there. Yeah, but look up Asha and Nadine. She's like, a lot of people from the New Age, they hate her because she sort of, called out a lot of things that the New Age is a part of, like the flower of life, which is not really the flower of life. That's a bloom of doom, as well as a lot of the Metatronic stuff and the teachings that go along with the flower of life, as well as things like, what is it called? The Emerald Tablets and Thoth and fallen angels and archangels and archons and stuff like that. Because people started formulating belief systems around this and they had identity attachments to it. So they didn't want to have those things, exposed as not being something that's sacred, like they call a lot of these sacred geometries, which are not actually sacred geometries. They're basically giant interdimensional symbolic trapping mechanisms. I mean, to put it in one way, that's also a complex thing. People always want me to explain about the flower of life. And it's just like, it's just complex. It's complex to understand because it's simple. People just think, oh, it's a pretty geometry and it's a bunch of circles. But what it represents is a finite life structure, the carbon structure, the finite life of carbon structure, limitation. It's just the whole thing is just, it's like, I was deceived by the flower of life. And the crazy part that pissed me off was, earlier on in my journey, I had questioned the flower of life. But because, you go into this sort of herd mentality about things like, oh no, everyone's got the flower of life. It's just this cool sacred symbol. And so, I had questioned it before because something about it to me felt off, and also about Thoth and also about Drunvalo Melchizedek, which I don't think is evil. I just think he's channeling and he's bringing forth stuff that a lot of people. We have unresolved wounds and we have a lot of collective and ancestral issues. And then if they go, and we're not all completely healed, it's just not, it's not realistic to expect that of ourselves. But then when you start interacting with channels, you're in a vibrational space where you can still be a match to corrupt entities and power issues and deceivers and stuff like that. So yeah, the whole thing, she definitely will make you question a lot of the things, especially within the New Age community. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking at that because the way I've always seen the flower of life, it kind of made sense to me in terms of like, it's, you have the meeting point and then it spans out and creates that like pea pod type of shape. And to me, that was kind of like representative of like DNA in a sense, or DNA is like it meets at a point and like at the helix, and then it spreads out and then it meets again. So that was kind of representative to me in the sense that like there's the union and then it separates and creates the life, the duality, and then it meets again at the end. So it was kind of like representative of the cycle of birth and death, or, you know, union and separation and duality and unity again over and over and over again. But yeah, I'm curious. Like, I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say other than that. That's just how I kind of understood it. I never seen it as a limited system. I thought it was just something that was representative of the nature of reality in the sense that it goes from unity to duality to unity again. So it would go this way and then it would branch off and go to a different dimension and then branch off from there. And when it continues, it just creates this intricate system of circles that are overlapping with one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big thing is because we're looking at it at such a lower level of what these things mean. It's sort of like people will say, "Oh, well, I don't care if this symbol was designed with negative intent because it just means this to me."
Right.
It doesn't mean that the symbol doesn't still carry a meaning beyond what it means to you. So that's like with the flower of life. A lot of people are like, well, it's pretty and it looks like this and it creates these shapes. But then if you also, oh, my phone's going to be dying. Let me see. So basically, yeah, that one is sort of a complex thing because it goes beyond science. And remember, like I said, when you're looking at the lens of everything through a distortion through a fallen basically system, everything contained within it is going to appear through that, which is the same with the flower of life. So everything is encoded through the flower of life, which is, you know, if you look how they always show you, it's the circle and then it splits into the vesica piscis and it splits into that and it splits and splits. But if you notice with the flower of life, there's always a circle, two-line circle encasing it in what looks like, if you look at the outer edge of it, it's a cube. So it's representative of, it's not that the flower of life is evil or this or that, which it's used basically for malicious intent. It's trapping people in a stage of awakening that they're not getting out of, and they think they know it all, and they're stuck in this little limited perspective. But I'll send you what is considered like the real flower of life, if you will. Okay. These are all human denotations onto symbols,
right?
But, which represents, like you're saying, but the more, and when you see it, it's funny because everyone, when they see it, they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this looks more like a real sacred flower of life, not this other fucking thing."
Right.
But it's where the energy flows in and out, and it's free flowing. It's not locked into a fixed aspect ratio. So yeah, I posted some stuff on that, but I get attacked so much for that. Ironically, it's like the new age, you know, main thing that people identify with. So
yeah,
I've made some posts about that, and I posted in my stories now. And some people are finally, you know, since I've called it out, a lot of people have come out. Because they go and they, you know, look into it and stuff like that. So yeah, that's enough on that one. The whole flower life is a triggering one for the new age.
Yeah, definitely, man. It is a beautiful looking symbol. I can see why people get so attached to it. But since we're hitting that mark anyways, and your phone's going to die, I just got two quick questions for you. If you think you got if you got the battery life left, number one would be, what are some sources that you find to be at least mostly reliable? Where do you get a lot of your information from in terms of, like, you know, even alternative news sites, certain Instagram, Facebook, YouTube accounts, anything that you find to be reliable to you?
God, you have to be your own discernment source at this point. Like I know a lot of people now are just sort of figuring stuff out, but I've had so long to where I access the stuff from within myself. So when I see it on social media, I can know whether this is sort of distorted, which almost everything is distorted. Let's face it, at this point, there's nothing that's really 100% pure.
That's why I said mostly reliable, because there's always going to be some ego involved that makes it their own.
And that comes with it. Just like with me, just like with anyone, it's being filtered through an ego. We have our own biases and stuff like that. Obviously, to the best of your ability, you want to spread things as clear as you can to give out the information, because all it is to strike resonance with people. So you have to put out, you know, whatever, and then you allow it to hit with people. If it doesn't hit, then, you know, it's not to say it's not true. There are people who are not at a level to perceive truth anyways.
Mm-hmm.
I would say David Icke is one of the simple ones.
Mm-hmm.
I've known of David Icke since I was like 10 years old. And although I didn't want to face a lot of the stuff back then because I wanted to live a normal life as a kid, I already sort of knew, like we're saying, that resonance internally, because I was meant to wake up at a certain age, because I didn't come here to play out in these superficial realities that most people play out. So, I mean, there's David Icke. I mean, you have to be your own discernment thing. I'm just trying to think of who puts out a lot of stuff. I do like that Angelic Humanity guy. He blew up pretty quick because he's putting out a lot of, but he posts basically Asha and Nadine's information. He posts some other people's stuff. I don't know. There's not just one source that I go to anymore.
Of course.
I don't really go looking for things. I try to keep up with the information and what's happening as far as, the corrupt agendas. So I think there's one called Freedom Faction. He posts a lot of stuff, and it's sort of just throws it out there information. It's not really saying this way or that way. You really just have to do the research yourself. You have to be your own source.
Yeah.
That's why I don't know what to tell people, like what books and what's this and that. It's like, just see as much as you need to know to get the bigger picture of the puzzle without needing every single piece. So yeah, I don't know what to recommend really. I know David Icke's been he's a great one. He's put out a lot of books. There's a lot of people who've put out a lot of stuff, and I don't agree with everything that any one person says. I don't think you should. Teal Swan. I love Teal Swan, but now she doesn't really post anymore about this stuff, because she's more focusing on basically trying to get people emotionally evolved so that we don't keep perpetuating the same crap over and over. But if you go back to some of her earlier stuff, she goes really deep in a lot of multidimensional and corrupt agenda type of stuff. But I know she kind of shies away from that stuff now because she already has a lot of controversy surrounding her. So
yeah. I've only recently got into her over the past month or so. Yeah, I think I've heard her name for years, but it's only recently that I checked out her stuff. And yeah, I agree with you. There's not much she says that I would disagree with.
Yeah. Her and David Icke are sort of the only two that I can think that for the most part, I can't really think of anything that I disagree with. It's not like I worship them or I need them for stuff, but I would say Teal Swan's been a great help. And it's so funny because as you'll see some of these things, it's almost like you already know what they're saying.
Yeah.
As it comes out, and you feel like, oh, well, I'm not learning anything, but all it is you're remembering stuff.
Yeah.
It's not really about learning it so much. It's about remembering. And then it's like the information comes forth within you, and then you already have access to the wisdom. It's just like, it's like key codes. And that's why you share it with people. You share information because then you want everyone to be in that space of awareness, not like hoarding information like you're a guru or you're, above people.
Yeah, I would agree, man. To me, it's all like ever since the awakening experience I had, I felt as if I could see the answer to absolutely anything within my own spirit, my own mind, or whatever you want to call it. But then after I started speaking the truth, my friends, for different reasons, I was pointed in the direction of Ram Dass, and I was like, yep. He speaks the truth. And Eckhart Tolle, I was like, yep. And I don't know if not many people have heard of this guy, but because he's from the earlier 20th century, George Gurdjieff. I never remember if I'm saying that right. George Gurdjieff or George Gurdjieff. Yeah. That was one that I really resonated with as well. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I followed a little bit of David Icke myself. And like I said, same thing as you, certain things I don't agree with Mom, but for the most part, what I respect about him is that I don't sense any deception from him. Even if he's wrong about things, he seems to be telling his truth. And that's what I look for, because there's lots of people that got things wrong. But when you look to the mainstream media, they're clearly lying. They know truths and they're telling you the opposite.
Yeah.
But then there's all these people in the conspiracy world that may be saying things incorrectly or they may be misinformed, but at least they're saying what they believe to be the truth. And then you can pick up the things that resonate with you, that make sense to you, and just leave the other stuff. But yeah. So the only other thing that I would ask you is just just for anybody who's listening and wants to learn more about you or what you do, or, find any information, just, plug your stuff. I know your Instagram is the.nomad.soul, correct?
Yeah. So the Nomad Soul, that's basically the only thing I'm on. I have my YouTube channel, but I basically just post my live videos there. because I haven't wanted to spread myself thin on a bunch of platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, sometimes I don't even want to be on Instagram. It gets exhausting. I deal with a lot of hate mail and stuff, because naturally when you're coming up against people's perceptions of reality and their paradigms, you're going to get a lot of backlash, which I'm okay with. But it's more about the time it takes me to sit here blocking people and closing off, deleting comments of hateful comments and stuff. So it's like, I try to just keep it on Instagram, and until I feel there's some other place I should be spreading information, I'm just going to be on Instagram for now.
Mm-hmm. Right on, man. Cool, dude. Well, holy fuck. That was amazing, man. Thank you so much for that. You shared so much information, super helpful. And just appreciate you in general and what you're doing. Keep fucking spreading that light and truth, brother.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem.